Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
Hello, MacPack. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you guys enjoy the show that we have planned for you today. My name is Mac Worley III, and this is On the Move. This is the show that attempts to inspire you to stand up for your rights. I want to say, first of all, thank you for joining the program today. If you'd like to get involved, if you'd like to join the conversation, the number to the show is 360-450-5625. Again, that's 360-450-5625. This is episode 88 of our program, and today is September 27th, 2015. Our show is titled, Hillary Hires Someone to Make Her Normal. And anyway, I want to get right into some of these topics. We have a lot of featured topics that we're going to be getting into. We're going to talk about new details that are emerging from the Hillary Clinton email scandal. We're going to talk about how Hillary has hired a consultant to soften her image and to make her look normal, like an everyday common folk. I want to talk about things that we're not allowed to talk about also. I want to talk about collective political correctness and how it affects other issues of our society, and I want to talk specifically about disparities between women's and men's health. I also want to talk about the Pope and his climate change and anti-capitalist agenda. I got a whole other list of articles here that I want to get to that are in the news. Lots of stuff on the agenda. Feel free to add your voice, anything that's on your mind, 360-450-5625. You can message us on Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow. You can get us on Twitter at OnTheMoveShow as well. We'll read your tweets live on the air. Anyway, lots of good stuff to get to. You can check out our website. By the way, we broadcast every Sunday at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at our hub, the main hub, OnTheMoveShow.com. So please check us out there. Like us on Spreaker.com/OnTheMoveShow. Please follow us there. We're also on iTunes, just in case you didn't know. So you can follow us on iTunes and leave us a review on there if you don't mind. I'd certainly appreciate it. All those things that you can do to help support the program, I would certainly appreciate it. Also, if you agree and support the message of things that we talk about, maybe you don't agree on everything, and I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody that you agree with every single one of their opinions. But if you agree with what I talk about normally, if you agree with the message of this show, the idea that individuals are more important than the collective as far as individual freedoms and rights and liberties. If you believe in these kind of things, please share the show. Share the show with your friends. Talk about it. Share the show with your family. I think if this is one small thing that you can do, if you want to help push the message of liberty, turn the dial of liberty forward, then you can help share the show if you'd like. So anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into our first topic of the show here. And before I do that, let me bring on our intern. His name is Mark Delphine. He's joining us on the program. Hey, Mark, you there?
Sure am. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining us again. I certainly appreciate it. So I want to talk the biggest news, the biggest breaking news is John Boehner is resigning. Apparently he'll be resigning in October, from what I understand. So we got to make it through this month, and I'm not sure when in October he's actually resigning, but he's still not out. And first of all, I'm curious, what do you think about the whole situation? Why do you think he's resigning? And is this giving some momentum to the Tea Party conservative movement?
Yeah, I do think it's giving momentum to it. I'm not sure if I necessarily like it so much. Actually, I have some mixed feelings on it, but I think he's probably just had enough. He's been in Congress since, I think, 1990. He's probably just about done with being not only the scapegoat for all of the ills that happen from the left, but also from the right. I think he's gotten way too much pressure from his own camp to shut down the government, and he's probably had enough of that. I don't know what's inside his head, but it really seems as though the kind of man and leader that he has been is that he's probably just being ineffective doing what it is that he's doing, and he wants to step down, maybe to be with his family a bit more. But I don't blame him necessarily. I mean, we've never been more divided and more heated politically than it looks like we are right now, and I might not want to be in the third most powerful position in the country.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I would agree necessarily with him spending more time with his family. From what I hear, it looks like he's going to end up being a lobbyist on K Street, getting some six-figure salaries here based on his positions that he has not stood up for. One of the things that I think in particular is happening here is that the grassroots, as you know, the liberals would like many people to believe that it's a fake grassroots, like this. It doesn't exist. There's not really people out there calling for Republicans to actually fight on issues that they supposedly believe in. I think one thing that is being pushed is this message that it's a fake grassroots movement, and I think this is evidence, in fact, that it is not. The conservatives have essentially risen up, and though I don't necessarily think that it would be a good idea for us to fight and shut down the government at every single turn, I also argue that there's really no real damage that's done to the average American person when the government is shut down. What do you think about that?
Yeah, the federal government really is given a lot more credit for what ordinary people's lives or how it affects more people than what it deserves. I mean, the federal government's really, most programs don't really meet or hit the average American. I mean, the programs that really do are never going to be shut down in an instance of something like this. So when you're dealing with Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, a lot of that is going to be, none of that's going to be affected by a shutdown. I just think that, a lot of the bureaucracies that we see in the federal government are really more for, feed the beast, shall we say, as opposed to the programs that you and I really benefit from. Most of those are local and state programs.
Well, for me, with this situation with Boehner, I see him essentially running away here and trying to get away from this because he doesn't want to shut down the government over Planned Parenthood, which honestly, I don't think that Planned Parenthood, in my personal opinion, should go away. What I think at the bare minimum, though, I think many people who disagree with abortion in general, on principle of abortion, they don't want to be forced to pay money into an organization that does provide abortions. And we were promised from the beginning that this would never happen, that we would never be federally funding anybody who does this, but we are. And now with the situation where Planned Parenthood is harvesting and selling for profit the body parts of babies who have been aborted, the fetuses, this is I think a critical issue for most conservatives, and I can understand why they would want to fight. Now, I understand there's two aspects of it. There's people who want to completely outlaw abortion, and okay, I understand your political viewpoint on that. And like I said, I'm kind of on the fence when it comes to this regarding abortion. At minimum, I think that people who don't want to be forced to pay for this stuff shouldn't be coercively taxed. I mean, because that's what taxes are. It's using the force of government to threaten you if you don't pay this money. So try not paying your taxes and see what happens, people. You'll have armed goons with guns showing up at your door. So this is, in fact, using the coercive force of government to fund something that people have a fundamental disagreement with, it not only just personally, but within religious philosophies. And I find that to be immoral to force people to do that. Would you agree with that, Mark?
I would. I mean, I'm pro-choice at my core. I believe that abortion has nothing to do with government, or government has to do with abortion. But I believe in that in principle, and that it has nothing to do with abortion, and so it shouldn't be funding it. Especially when you're dealing with this, 50% of the population is anti-abortion, pro-life, whatever label you want to put on it, and to force half the population to participate in a program where they're vigorously opposed to it, whether it be for religious reasons, moral reasons, or just because they just don't want their money going towards it, it's wrong. I'm talking about the Libertarian Party, the head of the party for a while there had said, they're pro-life libertarians or pro-libertarians, but need to be for the funding of abortion, and it pretty much makes sense to me. I mean, on principle alone.
Yeah. For me, I just don't like the idea of forcing other people to pay money for something they disagree with, and I don't personally care if it's a religious objection that they have to it, or if it's a just a personal reason why they don't. Maybe they just don't like that, whatever the thing is that you're funding. And I have a major problem just with forcing people to do something against their will. That I think is the crux of where I stand in my libertarian philosophy is just, the golden rule. You don't want anyone to force you to do anything else or anything that you find objectionable. So why would you advocate forcing other people to do something? The golden rule is treat others as you would like them to treat you. So that is essentially where I stand. Maybe it's just I don't know if this is an old timey kind of sentiment anymore, but it seems like people are getting so used to the idea that the government funds different aspects of American life and different subgroups, and we've classified ourselves down and narrowed our interests down in these special interest groups to where it's this group's asking for this thing, this group's asking for this thing, and everybody's just vying for government treats. And I think this is all. I think ultimately this just benefits the whole statist mentality of where we're competing for governmental favors. What do you think about that?
Well, I couldn't agree more. But, the devil's advocate to this, Mac, would be the idea of war. We go into a war that half the population doesn't agree with, and we're all paying taxes for war. To me, I'm not necessarily opposed to having funding on a state or local level because you have the right to move out of that state, and those policies are typically a lot more based on local control. So you have your vote counts a lot more when it comes to state and local politics than it does to national politics. If somebody, say, in Nebraska disagrees with something, the majority of the population is okay with it, I'm not necessarily going to say that taxes shouldn't go to a particular, that, of course, maybe very limited government libertarian. So that might sound a little contradictory, but if you really think about it, it's when you have an overwhelming number of people in the population who are vigorously opposed to a particular act, such as abortion or even war, I'm in that situation where I'm like, okay, are people being forced to pay for something when you're dealing with that? War might be a little bit more of an exception because of the fact that we all elect the president and the president's commander-in-chief and Congress because they should be declaring war, which I don't think they have since, World War II. But, it's the idea that you've got a great number of people who are really opposed to something and yet their tax dollars are going towards it. It seems, just like what you said, the force is very un-American in my opinion.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. So, one of the things that I want to point out here, specifically regarding Boehner, is that, he's not willing to fight. He hasn't been willing to fight and stand up for the issues, and I think that the grassroots is fed up with it, and rightly so, honestly. I don't blame them. If you're not willing to shut down the government over fights, and again, these aren't even necessarily the Republicans shutting down the government. If they put forward a plan where they're piecemeal funding the government, and the Democrats don't want to pass that legislation, or Obama vetoes that legislation, for example, that's not the Republicans shutting down the government. For one, that is the Democrats refusing to fund the government. So they, in fact, are the ones shutting down the government. But the point is, if you're not willing to fight over an issue and actually shut down the government over something that you think is a core value, as many of these representatives are elected. John Boehner specifically, we were told that he would fight. Once we got Congress, he would fight, and now we're being told, no, we can't fight now. Now's not the time to fight Planned Parenthood. It's just not the right time. I don't know when would be the best time to fight that. The funding of this group that does do abortions and uses federal money to do so. If now isn't the time, after these videos have been coming out from the Center for Medical Progress, if now is not the time, I don't know when is the time. And it's important to note that John Boehner, I don't think that he really does believe in what he's saying he believes, and that he will fight for what he supposedly believes in. He tells us this is what he believes in, but he refuses to fight for it, and he'd rather just be, shooting the links with President Obama. He's upset that he gets a lot of flack because he can't play golf with Obama anymore. He's got Harry Reid talking about how he stands by Boehner. Hey, first of all, if you're a Republican and you're being endorsed by Harry Reid, you've got some serious problems, let alone being the leader of the Republican Party. I mean, that is a major issue. So,
yeah, well, I think that's the reason why he resigned, though, Mac, is that he's just tired of fighting, and especially amongst his own party. I mean, he has been given a lot of flack. I honestly don't dislike John Boehner. I actually thought he was a pretty classy guy, and the way that he has handled himself through a very tumultuous presidency with Obama, and how, I don't know, I think he actually handled himself pretty well throughout all of this, even though I may have disagreed with some of his moves. But the idea of, where he's at in life and where he is at with his career, I think he probably just felt as though he's just ineffective. He's not effective with his own party. He was getting so many ultimatums within his own party, and so much pressure from the people within his own party, that he couldn't fight the opposite. He couldn't fight the opposition if he wasn't even able to win within his own group and his own allies. So I think when he probably made the right decision, just because of the fact that it didn't really look as though he was going to win another speakership if he didn't go after this particular issue. And, how important is it to some people to shut down the government over something as extremely controversial as Planned Parenthood? Maybe Obama should have vetoed something, or maybe Obama should have, actually, Congress probably shouldn't be funding this program anyway, but the idea of shutting down the government for it, I don't know. I mean, do you really think that they should have done that?
Absolutely.
I mean,
I absolutely
been, 17
think
closures?
Yeah, I absolutely think they should have shut down the government. First of all, because everyday Americans, typically, we do not see any effects whatsoever from a government shutdown. Unless you're a government employee, a non-essential government employee, which, by the way, you're non-essential. I personally don't believe that we should have non-essential government employees. That's just my personal opinion. But I think that the idea of creating more government employees and increasing the bureaucracy obviously increases our tax burden. And I don't think that if the service isn't necessary, why is the government doing it? Why can't the free market take care of that? Well, I don't think that the government should be doing anything that there is a free market alternative to. And there are very few and very limited things that there are no free market alternatives to, or at least there shouldn't be. Like, for example, a military. I don't want a bunch of mercenaries running around here trying to be our protection. I don't want a standing army on U.S. soil that's not under the direction of the President of the United States. That's not a free market alternative that I would be happy with. However, the idea of having government employees that are doing jobs that are non-essential and complaining when there's a government shutdown, look, you are not the justification of your government job. There has to be a reason for you to be getting that paycheck. And on top of that, these furloughed government employees, they got back pay. They got paid for the time that they weren't at work.
Yeah.
And many of them got unemployment benefits. And in Oregon, for example, I know you're out in the Pacific Northwest still, Oregon, those people out there wanted to actually keep their unemployment benefits after they got back paid for not being at work. They wanted to get double paid for time off. It's outrageous. And the typical average American, let me ask you guys out there in listener land, did you experience any kind of pain, hardship from a government shutdown? Anybody? Do you even remember any of the effects whatsoever? I think, on average, most Americans probably didn't feel anything. And if you did, it was likely because you went to some kind of memorial and a security guard who isn't normally there, but is there now to keep you out of this park, is there to make you feel the pain, to extend the pain on you. But if they shut down this monument, this memorial, because of a government shutdown, how can they afford to provide security to keep you out? It doesn't make any sense. First of all, it's public property. You have every right to be there. It belongs to you just as much as anyone. So you have a right to just go in and look at the memorial. But no, these people are put there as a way to make you, the average citizen, feel pain from the shutdown and see and make you say, oh, look, government shutdowns are bad. And in my opinion, they're good. They're saving money, and we know that the government isn't doing anything right now to screw us over.
No, I couldn't agree more. And actually, I mean, I do kind of, I definitely see your point on this. I mean, it's a bit of cognitive dissonance because, you know, I wasn't opposed to any government shutdowns necessarily because I do believe that it really starts to get us to refocus our ideas on what is a priority for the federal government versus what's a priority for state and local. It gets us to understand exactly when people are like, wow, the whole government shut down, and yet how did that really affect me? I mean, I do remember a couple of friends posting on Facebook about how they couldn't get into a government park. And it's like, wow, okay, you know, went on vacation and it was an inconvenience, but it's the kind of thing that, to me, when you're dealing with really understanding what the government's funding and what it should and shouldn't be funding, it gets a bit ridiculous about how much money the government is spending. And it kind of reminds me of a Ron Paul passage in one of his books where he had said something to the effect of, if we rolled back budget spending back to 1999, which is, you know, the heyday of Clinton's presidency, and where we were at a budget surplus. If you went back to government spending at that point, we would be looking at cutting about $2 trillion off of what the government spends today. Now, how many more functions of the federal government are necessary from 1999 to 2015? How many more? Because that's 16 years, and you mean to tell me that we're spending $2 trillion more per year after 16 years? What is more necessary now than it was back then? And at the tune of $2 trillion, not to mention the deficit spending we have, which is really more like $5 trillion, because if you add in all of the debt and the interest on the debt and all of that we're going to have to pay, why is it that we're spending all of this money? So I guess any reason to shut down the government is good, but I think that this is where Boehner was racking his head and going, okay, again, I'm really taking the fall for this. It was probably too stressful. And I was kind of joking. I mean, anytime somebody resigns from something, they're always saying it's to spend their time with their family. But really what it is I just don't want to put up the fight anymore. I'm not interested in this job anymore. And frankly, I was quite surprised. I mean, it's, you know, if the president and vice president died at the same time, Speaker Boehner is the president of the United States. I mean, that's a pretty powerful position to just basically jump off of, you know, I mean, to be like, all right, I'm done. Mm-hmm. So there's got to be a lot of reasons for it, but, you know, I don't know. Again, I kind of agree with you when it comes to, you know, shutting down the government to a certain degree is a good thing, so you can reevaluate priorities.
So I want to talk specifically about a point that you just made as far as how, you know, the government, the necessary government spending in the last 16 years has grown as the federal Leviathan has grown, and more things are dependent on government money, and we're spending more and more money than ever before. By the way, we are now more taxed than we have ever been in the history of the United States. They're taking more of your money than at any point throughout history. But the question is, you said, you know, why are we growing more and more dependent on the government? You know, if anything, as time goes on and technology is advanced, we should become less dependent on government to provide services for us. Things should become easier for us to do on our own because of technology and breakthroughs in technology. But yet, that's not the case. The government and statists alike try to wedge themselves in between us and whatever we need, and they try to become the main provider of services that they have no business becoming a provider of, in my opinion. But one of the myths that I would like to dispel here is what is happening from these rhinos. I consider Boehner to be a rhino. He's a Republican in name only. I don't think that. Personally, I agree with a lot of values inside the Republican Party. I consider myself to be a libertarian, but I agree with what the party stands for, not the establishment, but what it's supposed to stand for. Small government, you know, limiting the tax burden of the citizens, and standing up for the fights that we believe in. You know, and if you're not willing to stand up, I think that people aren't willing to vote for you. And I think it's clear the outrage that's happening right now. A lot of people are upset. A lot of people are angry at Boehner for his position of just capitulating with this administration and not willing to stand up, afraid to shut the government down, and in fact always saying that there's not going to be a government shutdown. We're not going to shut down the government. We're not going to stand up and fight for this. And this assumption that the Boehners and McConnells out there believe that if you stand up and you fight for the things that you've said that you're going to fight for, you're going to lose ground in the polls, you're going to lose, I believe this is, first of all, just a myth, and we can see so from the recent election in Congress. You know, the Republicans now have a majority after the shutdown, and they were so worried that the government shutdown was going to be blamed on them. But now, you know, we have the House, and these people are still, we have the House and the Senate, and people are still refusing to fight and stand up for these issues. I think this is the result. You'll see McConnell being the next target. Mitch McConnell. I think a lot of people are going to want him to resign. And honestly, I think they have a pretty good shot. I think there's a momentum going in the conservative movement right now, and I think the grassroots is really speaking out.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely is. And to my surprise, I was really pretty shocked with the fact that it seemed as though the country was moving in a pretty good direction, especially economically speaking. Now, for whatever reason that is, I mean, when you can spend $10 trillion that you don't have, things tend to feel a little good. You know, I mean, if I had a credit card that was pretty much unlimited, I could make my house look pretty good in order, even though eventually that bill is going to have to be paid. But the fact that, you know, typically the president gets credit for or is blamed for the things that happen under his watch, it seemed as though if you just rack up the pros versus the cons, Obama was having a pretty effective presidency, and the fact that conservatives, Tea Partiers, and Republicans especially are, you know, won that election in a pretty big deal. That says to me a number of different things. I mean, it spoke to me on the immigration issue. It spoke to me on the fact that debt spending is absolutely out of control, and the deficit every single year continued to seem as though it was growing. And then when you're looking at it from a standpoint of the, you know, just the wave of sentiment that was against the left, I was quite surprised. I mean, I was happy about it because I love gridlock in government. It keeps things from growing so fast and out of control. But then again, these Republicans keep throwing the budget out that's, you know, pretty big. The president's still still signing it into law. So I don't know. And where do you think it's going to go, especially this next election cycle?
Well, I think that the voters are going to be very upset, and I think it's going to show in the polls if Republicans actually don't stand up and fight for what they believe in. If we're told, oh, we got to win the next election every single fight, and we just capitulate and give up and throw our hands up and say, now's not the time to fight for this situation, and you know the left keeps winning and winning and winning as what has happened underneath Boehner. I think we have a real issue, and I think the Republicans are going to have a real issue in the polls, especially if they, you know, put another candidate up like a Donald Trump or even a Mike Huckabee, in my opinion. I know there's probably Huckabee fans out there. Personally, sorry about that, my computer made a noise. But yeah, I think even Huckabee and some of the, like Chris Christie's out there, I think they are not the kind of people that I personally want. I want somebody who's going to fight for conservative principles as far as fiscally conservative, and I want somebody who is going to relax on the social issues, back up on the social issues. I think so many Americans are libertarian in philosophy on social issues, but it's trying to explain to them the damage caused by these loose fiscal spending policies, and the fact that, you know, that people think that we have a responsibility and we have to redistribute wealth to everyone who needs it, and it has to be a fair society. Everything has to be fair, and I think explaining those principles to the majority of Americans is where the Republican Party is failing, and it's because they're not willing to stand up and fight and show people and actually talk about these issues. That's important. But one thing you mentioned gridlock, and this is actually something that I'm a little concerned with here, and I find a little bit hypocritical. There's actually a lot of Republicans right now talking about how they want to destroy the filibuster in the Senate, and we just had this conversation about how they, they used the nuclear options. The Democrats did the same thing in the Senate to basically destroy the filibuster. And now we see Republicans trying to do the same thing, or at least talking about it. I think the filibuster is an important tool to actually slow down government. I want it to be as gridlocked as possible and as many checks and balances as possible. So what do you think about that?
You mentioned something on that. I mean, that brings up a really good topic, in my opinion, because it's really about, you know, these politicians only care about getting elected and getting reelected, in my opinion. And I mean, sure, some of them might stand up for good principles, but the reason why conservatives typically talk only about the social issues is because that's what's sexy. Nobody really thinks oh my gosh, when it comes to deficit spending, I mean, it's never really a sexy topic. It's not fun to talk about in cocktail parties. It's not the kind of thing that people really get jazzed about. People get their goat up about, and they get inspired about abortion or immigration or gay rights or anything like that. So when it comes to the fact of what the Republican Party really should be,
hold on one second, 'cause I just want to point out that you said abortion and immigration are social issues, and I would disagree. I do not think that those are social issues. Especially abortion relates to the fiscal side of redistribution of wealth to fund that. That's a fiscal side, and then immigration has tremendous economic impact. So I don't think that you can lump that into a social issue.
Oh, that's fair. That is fair. I think maybe they'll blur the lines of both. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know that government has, should have a role in those as far as funding them. But when it comes to the fact of, say, whether or not we grant amnesty. Now, of course, that deals with a fiscal issue, but it's more on a social feel. And it's the kind of thing that I think when people think about it, you always hear these comments of, well, you don't want more spending or you want to cut spending, then that must mean you don't care. And so people equate spending with caring, Max, so much. And it's such, I can't get more annoyed by that concept because to me, I really care about the direction of where this country is going. And to me, a big problem, even Hillary Clinton mentioned this a long time ago, is that our deficit spending, our debt is a national security issue. And the fact that we're almost $20 trillion in debt now is a kind of thing that should be a bigger topic. It should be a social topic. But people don't really want to talk about it. It's like, we can push this out of sight, out of mind. It's like a credit card that I just want to never really think about paying back. But it's the kind of thing that, in my opinion, if Republicans were really good at this kind of conveying of message, it would be, we are spending way too much money. This is way out of control, and this is going to affect every facet of your life because the government is going to need to raise taxes or it's going to cut spending.
Hey, Mark, you still there?
Very politically fun topic to talk about. Either it's the alternative that people aren't interested in, and that's what's going to get us in trouble in the long run.
Yeah, I would agree with you especially with blurring the lines between what is a social issue and what is a fiscal issue. I absolutely agree, and I think the left likes to obfuscate quite a bit and blur the lines on many issues. For example, spending is caring, as you said, that a lot of them think. Spending is stealing, as far as I'm concerned. This is redistribution of wealth does not show that you care about people. It shows that you're willing to steal from one group and give it to somebody else, and I think that is fundamentally immoral. But anyway, Mark, we got to cut to a quick commercial break. Anyway, when we come back, we got a bunch of other topics that we're going to get to, guys. So you don't want to go anywhere, and if you do, you are a dirty, dirty communist. So stick around.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore. With the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us, to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/OnTheMoveShow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
Hello, fellow capitalists. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm on the line with my good friend and intern of the show, Mark Delphine. Hey, Mark, you there?
I sure am.
All right. So, anyway, last we were talking about is about redistribution of wealth, sharing is caring, things along those lines. So I want to move and pivot here to another topic, and this is the featured topic of today's show. Some new details have emerged regarding Hillary Clinton's email scandal, and she's hired a consultant to soften her image and make her look normal, like an everyday American. And what says, normal better than private jets and lavish spending accounts out of the Clinton Foundation? What are your thoughts on this, Mark?
The email scandal, unless something really comes out, is really just, I don't know. I find it to be more of a sideshow by Republicans to, comment on her lack of leadership. And I would agree. It's a lack of leadership. It's a lack of acumen when it comes to being Secretary of State, which, to me, if you can't be a good Secretary of State, or if you can't figure out that you don't keep things on a private server versus a public, it just shows a lack of leadership. But unless something really comes out, then these emails that was really big, I don't really care so much about Hillary Clinton's email. What I do care about is the fact that she's totally out of touch. Her ideas are way too tired. She is offering nothing new as far as being president, with the exception of being the first female president. And that, to me, hopefully we should have learned from the last time that, just electing somebody based on a quote-unquote minority status isn't a great reason to elect somebody as president. She really doesn't offer me anything as far as anything new, as far as anything exciting to vote for. And frankly, I wish, somebody else in the Democratic Party, besides a hardcore socialist, would challenge her for their role, because from what the Republicans are offering, it looks as though this is going to be a pretty boring election.
Well, okay, so you and I disagree on that, but I want to dive here into some of the things that Hillary Clinton said. I'm going to play a clip real fast. This is Hillary Clinton talking about how she's dead broke after the Clintons left the White House. They were dead broke, all right? And we're going to dive into this here, but I'm focusing right now on the side of her, as Mark said, she's out of touch. I absolutely agree with that. She's out of touch. She's out of step with America. She's not an average person. She has assistants and people doing things for her. She's not going to the grocery store on a daily basis like everyday Americans are and buying groceries for herself. She's not even cooking her own food, most likely. But anyway, here's Hillary Clinton saying she was dead broke. The Clintons were dead broke when they left the White House.
Advocacy for girls, and at the same time, the privileges, she says, of doing her own scheduling, which includes so many speeches. And I think a lot of people, George, have in fact focused on the fact that she and President Clinton are making a lot of money. It has been reported you've made $5 million making speeches. The president's made more than $100 million.
Well, if you have no reason to remember, but we came out of the White House not only dead broke, but in debt. Money when we got there, and we struggled to, piece together the resources for mortgages, for houses, for Chelsea's education. It was not easy.
Okay, so first things first, they were supposedly dead broke, and she was talking about mortgages for houses, as in plural, houses, more than one home. So first things first, I was watching a video where people were shown pictures of these lavish houses and asked, I think there was 2 or 3 of them on there. These are mansions. These are freaking mansions. And they're asked, which Republican politician do you believe that this belongs to? And, all these people are going through and they're naming off all these politicians on the Republican side, and they're trying to ask, they're trying to figure out which house belongs to which person. And then they reveal that all 2 or 3 houses belong to the Clintons. These people live in mansions. So let's not forget that they are the elite of the elite, the 1% of the 1%, and they're claiming that they're not. They're trying to pretend that they're everyday people, they're average Americans, which they are not. And now Hillary has hired this woman to basically recast her image. This is an article from the New York Times. This is dated April 3rd, 2015. So this woman is responsible. I believe this is the woman that helped soften the image of Michelle Obama. She encouraged her to go on a shopping trip, an undercover shopping trip to Target in Alexandria, Virginia, to showcase her dance moves also on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon. And the same things are happening now. She's doing the same things with Hillary Clinton. And here's Hillary on Jimmy Fallon. She's talking about her email scandal. And here's the clip.
Can I just talk about the email scandal?
Sure.
What is in the emails? Can you just say what's in the emails? That's all we want to know. If you tell us what's in the email, I'll get over it. What we're thinking is probably much worse. Are you just like typing in all caps? Is it embarrassing? I mean, is
a lot of misspelling.
Is it like my mom where everything's in the subject line and like nothing's in the body?
Well, it's kind of a variation on that, and there are thousands of them that are already out there. Most people have gotten bored after reading, like 10 or 12 because they're boring. I mean, they're, kind of, what are we doing? How do we do it? When's the meeting? Now, the most significant one that has come to light because, this was a really important issue.
Yeah.
And I had to talk about it on the email, and that is, I was asked if I could get gefilte fish into Israel.
All right, so this is her downplaying her email scandal, and we're going to talk some specifics about this. But I want you to continue listening to this. I'm sorry to punish you with hearing Hillary talk about her email scandal
in order for it to be used in time for Passover, and so.
That was the gefilte fish.
That was the gefilte fish email.
Here's the thing. Everyone's saying, there's some of these are top secret emails. And they go, top secret, and we got hacked into the thing. And they go, but we're going to release them, and we'll let everyone know what Hillary... And I go, wait, do we want everyone knowing what the top secret email is?
Well, but look, I've said I'm taking responsibility. I'm trying to be as transparent as possible. But
okay, as she's saying this, she's throwing out some dismissive hand signals here. Her body language is very dismissive about the responsibility that she's taken. But anyway, she goes on.
Yeah.
Nothing that was sent at the time or received was secret. This is...
Okay, now this is the problem. This is the issue at hand right here, is that she says nothing at the time was secret. This is actually a legitimate scandal, and I will make this clear. First of all, her business with the Clinton Foundation, which is essentially a slush fund for her campaigns and her lavish travel expenses and all of that. People pay her and her husband directly to the fund, or they pay them and they donate this money that they've received for the charity directly to their charity. So it's a tax write-off. But they can live off of this money. They can pay their employees, their assistants, all of the stuff, pay for their campaigns out of this. They pay for private jets. All of this is paid for out of the Clinton slush fund. And then they're able to write this off of their taxes as if they're dead broke. This is why they're saying that they're dead broke. But the reason why Clinton, being the only sitting Secretary of State, or the U.S. Secretary of State, she's the only one that's ever had a private email server in the history of the United States. She's the only one that's ever done it, even though she claims this is a common thing. She's the only one in history that's ever done this. But the reason why she did this, the reason why she created this private email server is because she wanted to hide and obfuscate her actions within the Clinton Foundation, because she didn't want that being public information. And the reason why she couldn't just have her own a second device, the reason why she couldn't just have another email account, one for her private life and one for her government business, is because her work in the Clinton Foundation is inextricably linked to her work in the State Department, her work in government, because she's receiving money for favors via the Clinton Foundation. That is why she's hiding this. And she's claiming that it's not a big deal. Oh, no, this is not a big deal. My emails are boring. It's boring stuff. Anyway, let's play a little bit more of this clip, and I'll comment a little bit more.
It's all retroactive. It would be
It's a little hard to explain, but sometimes different government agencies argue about what should or shouldn't be what's called classified, and then they say, hey, it wasn't at the time, but maybe it should have been. Somebody else says, no, I disagree, and they say, well, to be safe, maybe we ought to cross out some of the words.
Okay, now this is a subject, as Mark was talking about, as far as judgment, all right? There's this thing called the mosaic theory when it comes to intelligence, all right? When it comes to security clearances and things like that. So even if you provide enough information that is unclassified, even if it's all unclassified information, it can still be considered a breach of security if you provide enough to where the picture, the big picture that you're presenting there, could be classified as something that would damage U.S. security, U.S. interest. So even the mosaic theory says that if you provide enough of unclassified information, it can be dangerous. Let's assume that she's only having unclassified conversations about work on a private email server that could be hacked by China or Russia. It still presents a security breach. We've already discovered that there are 2 top secret emails that were on the server, and who knows how much more that were actually on it.
It wasn't at the time. And the stuff that's in it, I think, is really boring people, which kind of hurts my feelings.
Oh, poor Hillary. It hurt her feelings. Look, the stuff that wasn't at the time labeled classified on her emails that she either sent or received, that doesn't mean that it's not classified. Just because I type up an email that has a bunch of classified information or top secret information in it, that doesn't mean that it's not classified. The information is what's classified, not what you're typing it in. The information is. So just because you didn't put a little stamp or a little notice that this is classified information, that doesn't change the fact that the information is classified according to the very theory of the mosaic theory. So again, this is a lack of judgment from somebody at the head of the State Department. And this person wants to be the president of the United States. It's a severe lack of judgment. But anyway, she's been working on her image. She's trying to make everybody think that she's a real person, a likable person. Here's an interview with Hillary. She was asked to describe herself in 3 words.
A final question. Your friend, the late Diane Blair, wrote in her diary, quote, on her deathbed, Clinton wants to be able to say she was true to herself and is not going to do phony makeovers to please others. So knowing you don't want to engage in phony makeovers, give us 3 words that is the real Hillary Clinton. Just 3.
Just 3? I can't possibly do that.
I can't possibly do that.
Look, I am a real person with all the pluses and minuses that go along with being that. And I've been in the public eye for so long that I think, it's like the feature that you see in some magazines sometimes. Real people actually go shopping,
All right. Well,
So, I'm a real person with all the pluses and minuses of what comes along with that. Mark, what do you think about this, Mark?
Mac, the 3 words that she actually said them right there with her. Ha, ha, ha. It's a joke. It's so sad to see people who just blindly love this woman so much. It's like, and it's another thing that it's so sad that you can't attack her because she'll be called a sexist. She is horrible, and she offers nothing new. She's somebody that is win at all costs. She's somebody that is so self-serving. She does not care. It's so clear that she doesn't care about anybody but herself. And, that's evident in her marriage of convenience to Bill. It's evident in the fact that she throws anybody and everybody under the bus. And then that fake little laugh that she tries desperately to promote when she really thinks that she's in touch with people. And she's not. She's so out of touch. And that's the other thing that I saw a meme on Facebook the other day where it's like, it showed a picture of Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton saying, these are 2 people who were bought off by Wall Street, who have been serving in the public eye, quote unquote, for decades, and they somehow feel as though they're average, ordinary citizens or that they can represent them. That's the biggest joke of it all. These are people who, like she said, have been in the public eye for so long. How narcissistic can you get? You know what I mean? And I'd say the same thing about a Republican if they acted like that, too.
And look, she's actually trying to say that she's a political outsider. This is a big thing that's going on right now. I'm sure you're aware of it. It's the surge of the political outsiders. People are sick and tired of establishment types, people who've been in government for a really long time, and they're tired of it. I think that's a big reason why Trump has been leading in the polls, and why Carly Fiorina and Ben Carson are doing so well in the polls. People are tired of the establishment, and Hillary is claiming now that she's not part of the establishment. She's actually an outsider, somebody who's been in the White House probably, what is it, the last 16 years she's been in the White House, in and out of the White House. I mean, how more insider can you get than that? And let me actually, I just want to play this laugh again, because it is pretty bad. So here, one second here, I want to play it for you.
That is the real Hillary Clinton.
Man, that's right. Okay, so.
Oh, man.
All right.
And honestly, Mac, I think the reason why she's doing this is not because of anything on the right. I think it's because of Bernie Sanders, who, while this guy has been in the public eye, who hasn't really had a job outside of government since, I think it was 1980 when he became mayor of a city he's from Vermont, right?
Yeah, I think he's from somewhere in the Northeast. I don't remember.
Or maybe it's New Hampshire. I'm not sure. But, he's somebody that, has really been given the outsider moniker on the left, which, I couldn't disagree with Bernie Sanders anymore, but I don't think that he's nearly as disingenuous as Hillary Clinton is. And so she's facing some serious opposition from people in her own party. And I think that that's the major reason why she's trying to come up with this whole makeover of her personality and of her persona, because she's starting to get that feedback from people that, A, she's a liar, and everybody knows it, and B, she's such a total insider, and that she's such an establishment candidate that she wants to create in the public eye that feeling that she's not, which, again, just kind of goes part and parcel to her whole lying image. She'd win at all costs, say and do whatever it takes to get elected.
Yeah, it's the Saul Alinsky style tactics of the ends justify the means. It doesn't matter if you have to lie, cheat, and steal to get to the results that you want. You do that no matter what. But we have another clip here. This is Megyn Kelly on Fox News. She's talking about some new revelations that have come out about the Hillary email scandal. So I'll go ahead and play the clip for you guys.
In the email controversy plaguing Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. First, the Associated Press reporting today that the Obama administration found a chain of work-related emails between Hillary Clinton and the now retired General Petraeus. The new find raises new questions about the claim Clinton made back in March that she has surrendered all emails that could possibly be work-related. Plus, Fox News has found that the State Department now says it has another 900 Libya-related emails to give to the House Select Committee on Benghazi. I thought that had already been turned over. And the committee today indeed said they believe these should have been turned over long ago. Joining me now, Kentucky Senator and Republican presidential candidate Rand Paul. Senator Paul, good to see you tonight. So, as it turns out,
thanks for having me.
Amazingly, all the emails have not been handed over, apparently.
Well, I think one of the qualities you want in a commander-in-chief is honesty. And you've seen the polls. Over half of America now thinks that she's dishonest. A year ago, everybody thought the nomination was hers for the taking. I think you may find that the Democrat primary may be as equally competitive as the Republican primary.
Wow. Here's my question for you. Do people care? Because when you have Clinton supporters on, they say, no one but the Republicans cares about this.
No, I think ultimately it goes to wisdom, it goes to judgment, it goes to national security. And you want a commander-in-chief who would, at the very least, protect our secrets and not put them out there on display. But I think this combined with Benghazi. And the thing about Benghazi was it was the lack of security that she provided. It really wasn't the spin afterwards. To me, it was the 9 months where they pleaded for security in advance. Shows lack of wisdom, lack of judgment. It shows somebody who really, for the 3 a.m. moment, wasn't there. The phone was ringing and she didn't pick it up. But I think all of this adds together, and I think it is going to give her serious problems. I think you're going to see a real race on the Democrat side, and I think that's going to be the big surprise of 2016, is that not only will there be a competitive Republican primary, there's going to be a competitive Democrat primary as well.
What?
So, Mark, I'm curious, as far as your thoughts on the Clinton scandal, because For me, I see this as a real and verifiable scandal, especially now that we know that there's a potential that the FBI will be getting some of those supposedly deleted or wiped emails off of the server. I think we're going to get a lot more insight into what her activities in the Clinton Foundation were. And like I said, I think that her work in the Clinton Foundation is inextricably linked to her work in the government. We got a message here from Mark on Twitter who says Arab countries have given tens of millions to the Clinton Foundation, and now Hillary opposes the Keystone Pipeline. Is this a coincidence? What do you think?
Yeah, that's interesting, and I really am interested in knowing what's going to come out of this, because if it is just a bunch of emails that are personal, like what she's saying, which, again, I don't believe much of what she says anyway, but if that is, then it's kind of a moot point. But I am interested in knowing, and almost in soap opera fashion or drama, that I kind of want to see something, juicy out of these emails, just because of the fact that we're spending so much time thinking about it and talking about it, when really the ultimate is just what Rand Paul had said. It just shows a lack of judgment and leadership, and people do want a smart, honest man or woman in the White House, and I don't think that they're going to get it with her. I mean, she's a smart lady, but she's smart in almost a diabolical sense. She's not the kind of honest politician, or that's kind of an oxymoron, isn't it? She's not an honest person, in my opinion, to justify a presidency. And again, I think it shows more about what people are really looking for on the left, and that they just want somebody who hasn't been there before. They want to, before it's like, we can elect the first black president. Awesome. No experience. We can elect the first woman president with, a ton of experience, but just shows along the way, almost every step of the way, this is a woman who's made bad decisions in judgment as well as leadership. And to continuously want her as your president says something about you, in my opinion, that, it's almost sexist in its own, you know what I mean? It's, just to say, I just want her because she's a woman president. I mean, that's kind of, I don't know, it's pretty messed up, and it kind of shows us where the country is right now.
Well, I would definitely agree with you as far as, the left always saying that, gender is a social construct and we shouldn't pay attention to gender. However, when it comes to voting for president or public office, we want to have the first woman president. Oh, my gosh, it's so important. But wait a minute, wasn't it just a social construct and it's not a real thing? That's where I have a problem with again, I'm all about staying intellectually consistent. So even if I disagree with you, I can admire the fact that you're consistent intellectually. However, the left, not very consistent. It's all about whatever the winds of social change are blowing, which way they go. Where do I stand on this issue? Well, let me stick my finger in the air and feel what way the winds are blowing, because it doesn't seem like any of these people, liberals, the liberal politicians, or let's just call them progressives or statists is probably a better way to refer to them. I think that's how they look at it. They just look at the polls. And by the way, speaking of polls, nearly 6 in 10 Americans think that Hillary Clinton is dishonest and untrustworthy, according to polls. This is an article on the Washington Times. So I just want to point out, first of all, 900 emails from the Benghazi situation should have already been turned over, but they weren't. Oh, big surprise. We find that out now. We find out that there's a strain of emails, a chain of emails that she had with Petraeus that should have been turned over that were not. We know that Hillary is a liar. We know that the vast majority of Americans do not believe anything she says, but we're supposed to believe that she's being truthful about what's in the 30,000 emails. That's 30,000 emails that she deleted before she even turned over any emails, because she was the person in charge of her server. She was the custodian responsible for making the decision on what she turns over and what she doesn't. And we're supposed to believe that 30,000 emails were personal. They were about yoga. They were about all sorts of other random things that she does in her life. Let me ask you, Mark, in a 10-year period, let's say from now to 10 years ago, would you say that you have 30,000 emails that you've sent or received? 30,000?
I don't know about sent or I definitely have received, but that's including junk mail, so I don't know if that counts. I think, and that's the other part of it is that, if you're all of a sudden going to turn some things over, I mean, let's just play devil's advocate and give her the benefit of the doubt, which isn't really a very fun thing to do.
I think that's a dangerous move.
Let's just try to do that for
to
a
give her the
second
benefit of the doubt, I think is dangerous, considering she's a known liar.
Sure, and
people don't trust her.
I'm just saying this for argument's sake, right? And that what I'm thinking of is I don't want anybody reading my private emails, and so I'm going to delete 30,000.
Okay, well, time out on that, Mark, because you're not conducting your public office business inside your private email. Now, the moment you start doing that, that's when now we have a right, because you shouldn't be the one to decide what you show and what you don't. This is actually a law that prevents you from doing these kind of things. You don't have a right of privacy if what you're doing in this private email server is public business. And according to the law, we are allowed to see what you've done while you're working for us. So if you're going to mix everything together, that's your fault. No one forced her to make a private email server.
No. I totally agree, and I mean that's what I was saying. I mean, just for the benefit of the argument, I was trying to say, okay, let's just say if this. Why is she spending this much time deleting all of those emails when you've got to be smart enough to go, somebody is going to be a little bit weary of you deleting 30,000 emails. I mean, that even if, say 99% of them are all just garbage emails, but it says something to me that she's hiding something. And I mean, the idea that this is, her just laughing things off and going, to me, like I said, it's a lack of leadership. And it says, if you're going through, it's just like Nixon going through and erasing a bunch of tapes. It's like, that says something. It's pretty clear that there was something mishandled here. And it's, I mean, I don't want to say it's sinister, but it's probably something that was a big no-no that she could really get, some serious flack for. Maybe it's going to be an October surprise. Maybe it's going to be something that comes up at a time when is the least opportune for her. And again, I kind of like that. I mean, I'm looking forward to some juicy gossip when it comes to this kind of thing, because otherwise we're just arguing over emails. But to me, there is something being hidden.
Absolutely, and you may not want to say it's sinister. I will. I'll go out and say it. I'll go out on a limb. I believe that she's hiding her work in the Clinton Foundation, where she is essentially receiving bribes from foreign governments and campaign donors to do something in the government, a special favor. As Donald Trump says, you donate to these politicians and they'll do whatever the hell you want them to do. You own them.
Yep.
And this is what we've come to. This is our system of government now, people. I just want to make it clear that if you have money, you can buy a politician. They're for sale all over the place. You can just buy them, and you can own them, and you can get them to do whatever the hell you want them to do. And now you have special favors. This isn't democracy, by the way. This isn't the way our republic was supposed to run. This is crony corporatism, and there is a huge difference between capitalism and crony corporatism. That's what we're seeing now. And Clinton, she goes on. She's trying to say how transparent she is, and that she's turned over all these emails. I have a clip here of her.
There's an allegation about your email server. The campaign provides an explanation. You provide an explanation. There's a new allegation. You have to provide a new explanation. There's an addendum to that explanation. It has the feel of a drip, drip, drip. Can you reassure Democrats that there's nothing else here?
Well, it is like a drip, 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 and that's why I said there's only so much that I can control. But what I have tried to do in explaining this is to provide more transparency and more information than anybody that I'm aware of who's ever served in the government.
Ha! First of all,
oh, God.
Let's just point out that no one in the history of the government has ever set up their own private email server. So no one's ever done this before. How can she possibly say that she's making every attempt to be so transparent when she deleted 30,000 emails? If you didn't want this accusation, look, let's just assume that Hillary Clinton is completely innocent, okay? She's either completely innocent and an idiot, a royal dummy. I mean, just so stupid, because you couldn't even imagine that somebody would think that you were hiding something in the 30,000 emails that you deleted, and then you went ahead and you wiped your server. You didn't just delete the emails, you wiped the server. these are all things that you're showing that maybe you got something to hide. If these were about Pilates or her daily errands or just communications between her and her family, first of all, I think she lost her right of privacy to these private emails when she mixed it with public business within her government position. I think she lost that right. But secondly, I think we should know. I think we should know what is she doing, and now that she's lost this right of privacy because she's intermingled both public and private business. I think the act of her hiding, her actively trying to cover this stuff up, it creates a sense of maybe she does have something to hide, a little suspicion, and the fact that her judgment is off so much. If she was completely honest, which I don't think she is, if she was completely honest and trying to be transparent, why wouldn't she provide all of the emails?
No, I couldn't agree more. And I mean, that's the thing, is that if these are just boring emails, why did you take the time to erase 30,000 of them? Mm-hmm. You know how long it takes to do that kind of stuff? Yeah. And I mean, how is it that you can discern that quickly between a private like a matter of national security versus just a regular old, hey, haha, email? So, I mean, deleting 30,000 takes a lot of time to begin with. And then in addition to that, if it was just boring, no need to worry about the email, why did you delete it in the first place? It doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. Yeah, I completely agree. We got a comment on Facebook. Susan says that no amount of help will make Hillary look normal. I happen to agree. I think the harder she tries, the more she says, oh, look how normal I am. I'm a completely normal person. What's wrong with you people? I think the harder she tries, the more disingenuous it seems, and the funnier it is. It's almost like a parody. I feel like I'm watching an SNL skit. Yeah, I mean
but again, I mean, the best is yet to come, in my opinion, and I am looking forward to this. I mean, this doesn't seem like it's going to be nearly as exciting of an election as, say, like the 2008 one, when you had Obama and the Sarah Palin issues, I mean, just being broadcast everywhere. The idea that these candidates are going to be spending over $1 billion from corporate cronies to pretty much get them elected and say whatever it is that they think the public wants to hear, that's not exciting to me. But what is seeing somebody fall on their face that's tried to be, I mean, that's pretty much just lying their way into where they're at right now. And, I mean, it's interesting to see what people would have said if she were a Republican. Because, I constantly see how people on the left and on the right get, they play just such vicious politics with the other side, even if one agrees with them, just simply because they have a different letter behind their name, R versus D. But it's interesting to see what Democrats would have said if you had Hillary the Republican, who was with Bill the Republican, who essentially raped women, who was cheating on her, and yet she continuously was, sympathized with the guy, was apologetic for him, stood by his side the whole time. I mean, what Democrats would have supported this woman if she had an R behind her name, and yet still she's a woman who's trying to get elected? I mean, it seems to me that people are first, just for their party, but second, it's like, oh yeah, let's just go ahead and stand behind her because, well, she has the potential of being the first Democrat female president. And it's gender politics, I think, at its worst. Ridiculous.
This is one of the things that the left likes to play is gender politics, but they claim that, gender is not a big deal. It's a social construct, and it's not a real thing. Let's get over this and stop talking about gender. We want equality and social justice, but they're not. It's what's convenient to them. Again, it's people want to be left alone, but the left they want to be left alone, and they want to harass you and take your stuff and give it to other people because, again, to them, sharing or really, in reality, stealing is caring. They think that they're being modern-day Robin Hoods by taking from other people and giving to other people. That is, it's a fundamentally flawed concept, and it's not intellectually consistent. But hey, we got to cut to a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to tackle some pretty controversial stuff. So you guys don't want to go anywhere. We'll be right back.
I do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, pledging my life, my fortune, and my sacred honor. So help me God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/OnTheMoveShow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services, from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
And we're back. First of all, we got some listener interaction here on our Spreaker website. Again, that's Spreaker.com/OnTheMoveShow. We got some show comments here. Jackie comments on the show here. He says, Mac, you've invited me many times before, and I finally made it. I'm hating on this lying witch. I'm appalled that she hasn't been arrested, at least for Benghazi. She's always been a liar and a cheat way back in her days of Watergate. We need to know how much and from where all the money came from the Clinton Foundation. She's due jail time and frees all the Clinton assets. So, first of all, he continues on to say that he's a retired, disabled Army veteran. So I just want to say thanks for your service, Jackie. And we also have another comment. We have an old listener who found me from our Haywire Gulch broadcast. By the way, I don't know what happened on Haywire Gulch. We were simulcasting on them, and the system switched over and all this stuff. And I don't know. I sent a few messages, and nobody contacted me back. So I'm not on Haywire anymore. I don't know what happened. I'd still like to be on Haywire Gulch, by the way. So, Phil, if you could talk to Haywire and let him know, I'm still interested. I didn't know that I was being listened to over there or not, and I know the system changed, and I don't know if I was broadcasting anywhere. HaywireGulch.com disappeared. I don't know where it went. I think if I go to the website, it's not there anymore. So, anyway, Phil, thank you so much for finding me, and thanks for tuning in. And if you could tell those guys, I would love to still be over there. So, anyway, let's move forward here. Let's talk about a few different issues here. I promised you guys we're going to talk about some controversial stuff. So, before I do that, before I actually talk about the controversial stuff, I want to just mention one more thing that many people aren't aware of about the Clintons. Did you know that when they left the White House, they stole a bunch of stuff? Did you know that, Mark?
I had no idea. I mean, well, elaborate for me, please.
Okay.
I have no idea.
So this is not just a fly-by-night news station. This is ABC News. .com. All right. So Clinton returned White House furniture, or the Clintons returned the White House furniture. Former President Clinton and his wife, Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, have sent $28,000 worth of household goods back to Washington after questions arose whether the items were intended as a personal gift or donation to the White House. So basically what they did is they received stuff from other heads of states as, things that should have gone into the White House, as historically speaking, gifts from other, heads of state are typically kept in the White House. And apparently they took $190,000 worth of china, flatware, rugs, televisions, sofas, and other gifts that they were given when they left. And they announced that they would pay $86,000 worth of the gifts, which is nearly half the amount. And some of the stuff they returned, some they didn't. I mean, the fact is, this is crazy. First of all, they're talking about how they were dead broke and how they didn't have any money, but they had $86,000 to pay for stuff that they stole from the White House. And secondly, maybe we should not be angry at them. Maybe we should just feel bad because they had to steal, and they were so bad off financially that they actually needed to clean out the White House to earn a buck. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I feel for them. I really do. I mean, the idea that, he was just impeached and he had some pretty, rough times as president, maybe he just felt entitled to it. And, what is Hillary going to eat off of, Chinette? I mean, she's got to eat off of the real China, It's just, yeah. I mean, how is a, former first lady supposed to live without, some $190,000 worth of stolen material?
Yeah.
But wait a minute, was it? So what you were saying, these are gifts given to them. How was it stolen? I mean, were they not gifts? I mean, is that a misspoke, or what? I don't know what you were saying.
They were gifts given from heads of state and things along those lines, and it's assumed by the people who have given the gifts. I believe later in the article they talk about how the gifts were intended to stay there. Now let me actually.
Oh, to stay in the White House. Got
yeah,
it. Okay,
yeah. I mean, you know how when presidents receive gifts from heads of states and other people, we keep them in the White House. It's like a little museum of things that were given from heads of states and stuff. So this is something I find particularly disturbing, that these people think that the Clintons, they think that they're entitled to these kind of things. But, in my opinion, nothing says common folk like $190,000 worth of china, flatware, rugs, television, sofas, and other gifts. So, yes, they are the common people, everyone. They're the common folk like you and me. They put their pant legs on one at a time, and, they only have two people who are paid to wipe their butts. So, anyway, let's move on to something different here. So I want to get into a conversation that I know that Mark really doesn't want to have with me here. So, but this is.
Oh, that's not true.
well, it's kind of it's not politically correct. It's not a politically correct conversation, and we're not supposed to talk about these things. We're supposed to shut up and just accept things the way they are. So. Me being the guy I am, I'm not very politically correct, and I don't really care what people think about me. I know where I stand. I know that I believe in individual rights and freedom, and I don't think that anyone should be treated differently based on their sex, their orientation, their sexual orientation, their skin color, religious bias. I think that we should be free to live our lives. But one thing I want to talk about specifically here is the disparities in women's health in relation to men's health. And first of all, I've done a little bit of research here prior to the show, and I just kind of want to name some statistics here. And first of all, let me point out the principle here. That there's several principles that I just want to address here. And the first of which is that redistribution of wealth, in my mind, is theft. I've mentioned this several times already this episode. And in my eyes, if you are taking money from one group of people, it creates a problem when you start giving that money to other people. Redistribution of wealth creates many, many, many problems and many disparities in the economy, in the political system in general. It's just a negative thing. It's a coercive force, and you're forcing people to do something against their will. When you start doing this, you're also increasing the overhead tax burden on the average citizen, which, if you're a small government person like myself, you want to limit the tax burden on the citizens. You want the government, as I mentioned earlier in the show, to do the bare minimum, what is absolutely necessary for the government to do. So anyway, now let's talk about intellectual consistency again, because I have an issue here where I don't think that the people who are in favor of redistribution of wealth, the people who are actually talking about equality and we should be doing more for women's health and things along those lines, I don't think they're being intellectually consistent. Because if they do agree with redistribution of wealth and they think that it's we're better as a society overall when we start pumping money into different areas that supposedly benefit society in general, like women's health. Okay, so how could we not be better off as a society if our women are healthier? That's the mentality. That's the idea, but it's not being equally distributed. Now let's talk about some of this stuff here, because women's health is a huge topic, and it's a huge political issue that many people are wound up about. But let's mention a few things here. First of all, women can commit suicide at a lesser rate than men. Now, they try to commit suicide 3 times more often than men. However, they're apparently less successful, I guess, because 79% of all successful suicides, I guess if you want to call it that, successful suicides, 79% of them are men. There's 7 federal agencies that are specifically for women's health, but there's not one for men. Much more funding goes towards women's health than towards men. According to what I've been able to research here, let's see, prostate cancer is only about 14% less likely to kill you than breast cancer is. However, breast cancer receives 660% more funding than prostate cancer. And there's a bunch of other issues regarding that as well. Especially let's mention, and Mark and I had a conversation off air about this, about how women have the right to vote, but they also avoid a draft. They avoid the status of a draft. So they have all the benefits that are associated with citizenship, like you have the right to vote and all that good stuff, but you don't have to go into what Mark and I would agree is essentially servitude or slavery. The statist government can force you to fight for a cause that you may not even believe in. So, first of all, Mark, what do you think?
Okay, well, there's a couple of different things on there. First off, I mean, I would never be interested in taking away any legal citizen's right to vote, regardless of gender or whatever. I mean, so to mention the idea of that was a kind of touchy subject that I was looking at it and going, I'm completely against a draft for men or women, and so I wouldn't be up for promoting women to be drafted. I would be up for taking away men's ability to be drafted. So that's the kind of that's the touchy subject that I was trying to avoid, because to me it's like, yeah, but I'm not really interested in taking away anybody's right to vote, nor am I interested in forcing somebody to be drafted. That being said, when it comes to the suicide issue, I mean, that's a very big, that's a really big point. I mean, it was that's a near and dear thing to me, because I've had a very, very good friend of mine who took his own life. I had some serious depression coming out as a gay man, and I know a lot of gay men who have had the exact same situation happen with them, and a lot of times it's just not even addressed, because a lot of times it's just not talked about. And I think that's one of the major reasons why men's health issues, I don't think, are brought up, because they don't have a lobby for it, because of the fact that a lot of men just don't even talk about their health. And kind of in jest, I mean, if men are 4 times more likely than women to commit suicide, then that just means men are better at it. So women, if you really want equality, you're going to have to start taking your lives in equal numbers. Totally kidding. Sorry. But no, I just thought that was one of those where you're kind of, in a situation where it's a gray area of going, I don't know, to me, you're right in the fact that, I mean, especially with the prostate cancer, when it comes to the other issues of why women's funding of health issues are a lot more in terms of the sheer size and quantity of them. But it's just the idea that, to me, it shouldn't be a federal government's role to make women healthier, to make men healthier. The federal government isn't here to make you healthier. It's to defend the nation's borders and to coin money, which they gave away with the Federal Reserve Act. But that's another story. So, to me, you're looking at a local government or a state government in terms of how they fund certain things. That's a different story. But to me, health issues should be between you and your doctor. It should be between you and your insurance company and your doctor. It shouldn't be an issue of government. So I'm all for decreasing, any kind of national funding for these kinds of situations, because it shouldn't be a role of the federal government. Right. Not because I don't want people to be healthy, but it shouldn't be a role of the federal government, because like what you're saying, redistribution, taking money from some and trying to make people healthier isn't the role I envision for my federal government.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And again, I'm not arguing that women should be forced to go and get drafted into the military. No, I'm not. But I'm pointing out the differences here, and also pointing out the lobby that the women's rights lobby, the women's equality lobbyist, they're not arguing, hey, we want to be drafted too. No. They're arguing for special privilege and not equality, but a special classification and this is a problem that you have when you create lobbyist groups that basically you have a system where the government can be bought. We were talking about how politicians can be bought. When you have a system where people can form and organize lobbyist groups and donate tremendous amounts of money to campaigns and to politicians, you have a situation where certain people get special favors. It's basically us buying politicians to get special favors, and then what it does is it creates resentment from other groups, like men who are like, "Hey, well, why aren't you guys getting drafted too?" It's the same kind of thing, and it does create resentment. It also creates other groups. It inspires other groups to do the same thing. Let's organize. Let's get our politicians in our pocket here, and get our special favors, get our piece of the pie. And basically,
where's our stuff? Why can't we take money from the government and fund our issues, whereas people should just be treated as individuals and not groups. And I think that's the ultimate form of collectivism. I mean, when you're dealing with racism, sexism, homophobia, or anything like that, you're dealing with collectivism. You're talking about people as groups. You're not talking about people as individuals. And what's made this country so great is that the needs of the individual, or the rights of the individual, they outweigh what, quote unquote, is for the good of the whole. When you start coming in and saying, well, it's for the good of the whole, it's for society, which is a nebulous term. Nobody can ever define society. But when everybody uses that, I get a bit weary. And because of the fact that people are really basically just saying, I want to take money out of the hands of people and give it to people like me, because I feel that this is the right role of government. And I couldn't disagree more. I mean, that's really the opposite of what government should be here for. Because once you start treading into that territory, Mac, where does it stop? And when does the government continue to keep going, well, this is for national security, this is for your protection, this is for, you ever seen V for Vendetta? It's that same kind of feeling of going, the government's creating problems that only it can solve.
Yeah, and I have a major issue with, but regarding the consistency of the left kind of women's movement, women's health rights stance on this, I want to just point out that if we're talking about the greater good of who would be, if we're being intellectually consistent as statists, and we think that the government is supposed to be doing these jobs, well, I would disagree with it, but let's be intellectually consistent. Why do women get so much more funding? Women's health gets so much more funding out of everyone's pocket when they live longer than men. On average, they live as much as 10 years longer than men statistically. Life expectancy on average here, I'm looking, is about 79 years old for a woman, and according to this, it says 72 years for a man. So shouldn't we be pumping more money into men's health issues than women's health issues? But the left, they're not talking about that. They're talking about women's health, and especially they like it because it's associated with Planned Parenthood and the abortion mills and stuff like that the Republicans are trying to fight against, some of them anyway. But I think that is, again, we talked earlier about blurring the lines. You want to blur lines, let's talk about how abortion is now associated with women's health, and it's being funded as women's health issues. And again, people who have a fundamental disagreement with this, they have a problem with it, and their money is being taken and used to do things that they don't agree with. But let's pivot here. I want to talk about an interesting stat I found looking at today in show prep basically here. We're often told by a lot of the feminists out there that there's a rape culture in America, that men are just sexist bigots, and we're terrible people, and we're always the ones that commit violence upon women. I found an interesting stat here. 25% of women are victims of domestic violence. According to the same source, it says 11 to 8% of men are victims of domestic violence. And also 830,000 men each year are victims of domestic violence from violence instigated by a female. So this is not just a one side only. And I just want to point out an issue here with this fact, with these statistics. I would imagine that a man would be less inclined than a woman to report getting beaten up in a relationship. I would think that this 11 to 8% of men being victims of domestic violence would probably be dramatically higher. And I'm curious, how many of you out there, MacPack, how many of you out there, tweet me on Twitter at OnTheMoveShow, have you ever been hit by your spouse? Like even just once, maybe you deserved it. Maybe you did something stupid. All right. I personally, I have been hit. All right. I've been hit before by a spouse, and I didn't call 911. And a lot of times I probably had it coming. So, not that I'm advocating violence, but I'm not out report. I would not report if a woman slapped me in the face. I'm not going to go call 911 and report her for domestic abuse. Whereas I think that there may be a difference on the other side, on the other end of the spectrum from women. I think they would be, maybe they're fearful that the man would hurt them if they report it, but I don't think there's that element of shame of being beaten up by a woman that women have on the other side. What do you think about that, Mark?
Yeah, I do disagree with you. I think when it comes to rape culture, there are a lot of rapes that are not, that do not go reported because for fear of retaliation. My mother was a victim, as was I, of domestic violence. My father, who was a Vietnam vet over I think 4 tours, he was extremely violent and very vicious, and beat the crap out of my mother a few different times, and me. And I mean, it was a traumatic situation, and so. When it comes to it, this sounds utterly sexist, but women typically are not the physically stronger of the two sexes. I think most of us can agree with that. Of course, there's exceptions to the rule, but to protect women in that instance, I think is a very big deal. I mean, a friend of mine once mentioned the ability for a woman to say no is the mark of a civilized society. And so when you're dealing with stuff like rape and when you're dealing with domestic violence, it might be a double standard. I do agree that it might be a double standard sometimes, but it is the kind of double standard that, to me, as long as it's not taking funding out of the pockets when you're talking about Planned Parenthood, but when you're just talking about stats, I mean, I might disagree with you on that, Mac. I don't think it's necessarily, I don't think it's a good thing that women don't report rape or that they don't report domestic violence. Whereas I'm not that concerned if a man doesn't, because usually a man can fend for himself on that stuff. Granted, call me a little sexist on that. Maybe it is a double standard, but that's not. It's not the thing that drives me when I think about men versus women. I think I'm definitely for equality, but I'm also for when it comes to a situation of abuse. I think there is more than the fair share of abuse from men to women than vice versa. I don't know. Do you agree?
Oh, I don't. I honestly, I don't think that this is a men-only problem. I know, statistically speaking, I'm wrong according to this. But what I would say is that I think that there's a lot of men that have been hurt or assaulted by women, by their spouses, and they didn't report it. I think this 8 to 11% that have been victims of domestic violence, I think it's probably a lowball number. By the way, we got Mark on Twitter. He says, I don't remember that I was ever hit by my ex-wife, but I was seriously clawed in the face, and I totally deserved it. So, these are... I would say that there's a lot of men out there that have been struck by women, and I'm pointing out a double standard to where I think it is more socially acceptable. We have hardened our hearts on this topic to where it's more socially acceptable for a woman to commit violence against a man, and it's almost funny. We laugh at it. It's like, haha, you're a weak man, you're a sissy, you've got beat up by a girl or something along those lines. Can't you take care of you can defend yourself? I would have to say, it's a little bit sexist to make that difference. If you're talking about equality, I'm all about equality. Let's treat people how they deserve to be treated. Let's treat people based off of their merit, their actions, not their skin color, not their sex. I think these are important things, and I think when you do treat people differently, you are being a little bit hypocritical if your argument is that. And I just want to point out a stat here. I'm looking. The CDC reported that in the group of 18 to 28-year-olds, 71% of non-reciprocal violence, which means that it's violence that was inflicted upon one partner from another, but the violence was not responded to. So 71% of non-reciprocal violence was instigated by females in an 18 to 28-year-old group. So, I think this is that big disparity that I was talking about. It's a double standard. I think society just thinks it's okay for men to beat up on women, and we're supposed to sit here and shut up and not say a damn thing about it, because if we do, we're called sissies, and we should be able to take care of ourselves. What do you think, Mark?
Well, I think he misspoke on that. I think society says it's okay for women to beat up on men. I think he said men to beat up on women.
Oh,
I don't think
well, then I definitely misspoke. Yeah.
Okay. So, to clarify on that, I think you're right, and it is the kind of thing that, but I think that's just more of a cultural thing, though. And in general, it's like we're always rooting for the underdog, or we always give a little bit of slack to somebody who has the disadvantage. So when it comes to domestic violence or rape, that's definitely going to be the situation with women. And it's an interesting situation because I'll I don't date women, so I don't I don't see it as prevalently as somebody who's straight like yourself might. But I think when it comes to college campuses, this is one of the issues that I had an interesting debate with a few of my friends, because Carla Fiorina had mentioned how this rape culture is just a tool of the feminist left to hurt men on campus and that kind of thing. And that's where I'm really torn on this one, Mac. I don't mean to digress too much and loop me around if you don't want to, but I think when you're dealing with rape, for instance, if a man does rape a woman and it is an actual rape, this is devastating to a woman, and it could destroy her life for good. That really messes with somebody's head for a long time, and it affects her relationships with all other men in the future, even with her children, even with possibility of having children. And so it's a horrible, horrible thing. Like I said, it is definitely a law that we need to have, very much strengthened, and we need to have very much enforced. But on the flip side of it, there are some times, and this is when, to Carly Fiorina's point, that there are a lot of times where, a girl just gets drunk or high the night before or that night, and then she has sex, and then she regrets it, so she calls rape. And I'm not saying I don't know how much this happens. I don't know when this happens, but I know that it has happened. And the problem with it is that destroys a man's life for the rest of his life. And so that's where it can be a double standard and go both ways, because a lot of times women don't ever report rape for fear of being shamed, raked over the coals by an attorney who's just going to go ahead and rip apart her personal life just to protect his client who may have actually done this. So you can see where it comes down to where it's like, whoa, this is a real touchy issue when you're dealing with rape, because a woman could just be like, hey, I don't like this guy, or I was pissed off with him, or maybe I saw him flirt with another girl, so I'm going to say he raped me. That probably doesn't happen that often, but the fact that it does happen is what really bothers me about the situation, that it can be a double standard. It can be turned around on its side and really can hurt the man in the issue. So you see where I'm getting at when it comes to rape issues. It's a really touchy subject.
I absolutely do agree. It can be an extremely sensitive issue, and I get it. And I'm all for trying to protect people who need protection. And I think that's part of our society as men. I think many men feel the need to protect women, and I think that's a good thing. I think that is a solid value that we should encourage here in America. Hey, by the way, Jackie on Facebook, he comments here. He says, Mac, I disagree on the draft. I found that service taught me the biggest lesson. I learned of the people and their rights and right to them. Many countries, in many countries, it is mandatory to serve 2 to 3 years of service between the ages of 18 and 25. It builds character. When I look at our young, lost people, I wish we had a program. It doesn't have to be the military. There are many volunteer jobs in the U.S. And by the way, I've been assaulted several times by women in my 63 years of life. I'm all about equality. If a woman acts like a man, she will be treated like a man. So first things first, I want to just comment here on so much in this. I just want to say, first of all, Jackie, I respectfully disagree with you. I value your position, and I understand why you believe that. For me, I have an issue with the government forcing someone to serve in the military against their will. I don't want anyone to have to do something that they don't want to do. So I'm just against coercion. That's where I stand. I don't necessarily trust governments in general. So I don't want them to have the power to force people to do things they don't want to do. But I'm just against coercion. So that's where I stand on that. And Mark, would you agree with my sentiment on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a form of slavery, like we said, and it's the kind of thing that, to Jackie's point, I think, yeah, it does build character, but that's when you voluntarily participate. If you're thrown into something, especially a war where you're fighting for something that you don't even believe in, that, to me, really, that separates the country, and that really, that was the kind of thing where my dad, when he came back from Vietnam, he was drafted, and he was called a baby killer, and he was, really mentally, and he mentally suffered for this kind of thing. Because, when you're thrown into something that you don't agree with, you're gonna, it's gonna mess with your head, and you're gonna have a lot more PTSD when it comes to that kind of thing. But to the point of the draft itself is that if this country engages in a war that is necessary, like World War I or World War II, where we're really looking at the thing, we needed to get involved in that, you naturally have people who rise to the occasion, who want to serve their country because they want to fight for what it is that we're doing. I mean, even when it comes to the war in Afghanistan, because we were attacked. But when it comes to other wars, and maybe even like Iraq, or when it comes to, say, Vietnam, wars that aren't necessarily politically viable, or that we really didn't necessarily have a true cause of going into, that's where, when the draft feels as though it's necessary, that's when I'm at my biggest opposition, because I believe that, again, if a war was really worth fighting for, you wouldn't need a draft. People would volunteer for it.
So, I just want to point out some disparities in what you were saying as far as the draft. We were fighting for our actual survival in World War II and World War I as well. And according to what I'm doing on a Google search here, it looks like there was approximately 10 million or so people that were drafted in World War II. So, obviously they still needed people. So, I understand the idea of, and I agree with you. I think many people will rise to the occasion if it's a cause that they believe in, if it's a war that they believe in. And it happened in Iraq, and it happened in Afghanistan. There was no draft for that, and there was a big surge. A lot of patriots decided to serve their country, and I agree with you on that mentality. I just wanted to point out that there was, in fact, a draft in World War II. So, but
I stand corrected. That is tough. It was, that's. Damn, I hate it when I'm wrong, but but it is the kind of thing where, and that's another thing. Not to get too far into that, but we also even put people in internment camps. This is the kind of thing where the wars have never been a good situation, and when it comes to it, I do believe that honestly, that I'm just opposed to the draft. Plain and simple, I believe it's a form of slavery, and if you're thrown into something that you don't want to be involved in, especially when it comes to putting your life on the line, that's a form of slavery, and I'm just, morally and philosophically opposed to it.
Yeah, well, and philosophically, I definitely agree with you. I'm a volunteerist. I believe in that people should be allowed to do things of their own free will. And regarding the comment, it builds character, I would agree that the military builds character. I volunteered for the military. I served my country for 6 years, real close to 6 years. So it was something where I did a lot of personal growth in there, and I think I learned a whole lot, and I certainly made a whole lot of friends, and I was serving with some amazing people, and I don't regret it. I do not regret my time in the military at all. But the idea that doing something, being forced to do something against your will builds character, I disagree with that. I don't think that if we could say that, then forcing anybody to do anything against their will, it builds character. I don't agree with that concept of building someone's character is a good enough excuse to force them to do something. I think that there are a lot of issues going on with our young people today. But I honestly, I don't think that a draft or forced military service conscription is an answer. I think a lot of the reasons why our young people are so lost is because they're being held down by this leviathan that's on their back. So the government is preventing them from being marketable with jobs. We got things like minimum wage that are preventing a lot of minorities and young people from being able to get their first job because they've been priced out of the market because people don't want to pay $15 for a job that's only worth $8 an hour. So those are the big reasons why our young people are lost. Let's look at our role models that we have today. In the past we had role models like now I can't think of even one. Holy cow! In the past we had more wholesome role models, Leave It to Beaver-esque style stuff. Now we got Kim Kardashian and Kanye West, and these are the people that our kids are looking up to. I think that has a big role in society as far as the kind of generation that's to come is, who are people looking up to? Who are their role models? People are looking up to Kesha, brushing her teeth with Jack Daniels. I think that's an issue. I think that's what we're losing the country. Jackie comments again here. Mac, I think JFK asked not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. I also made the point that volunteering for the military wasn't the only option. And okay, I'll give you that, Jackie. Like I said, I respect your opinion. I don't like coercion. That's just where I stand. I'm not a big fan of coercion. So
yeah, and I don't want to discourage Jackie from participating in this conversation either. I think it's very appropriate to hear somebody who's got a lot more years on us and a lot more experience who has served the military. And if he was drafted into it and he felt that there was a benefit to it, we look at people just because of the fact that they're 18 that somehow they're an adult or that they can think for themselves. I tell you, legally speaking, maybe that's when you can enter into a contract, but when you're saying forcing people against their will to do something, we do that to children all the time. And that's the kind of thing that, they need to be taught and geared. And, to Jackie's point, maybe at the age of 18, if you are lost and if you do not have that kind of discipline, if you aren't respectful, maybe joining the military is a good option. And maybe it's the kind of thing that would really build your character and your discipline. So, I appreciate him in his service, just like I appreciate you and yours. But maybe he has a point. I don't necessarily believe that we should be forced into military service. But what if it's an option that, sure, we do help pay for people's college, but I don't think we give them enough. We spend trillions on wars, but, the fact that homeless vet is even a term that's even an option to, that we can speak is just a travesty in this country. And the fact that we should be doing a little bit more for the people who serve the military. We should be, giving them a lot more in the way of benefits. And I don't know. I tend to agree with people that have a lot more service background than I have because I never served in the military. And so it's the kind of thing that, if he was forced into it and he felt as though maybe he got, a good, butt kicking for it and that he grew up and was disciplined more for it, maybe we should hear him out. Maybe we should think that, maybe that might be a good thing. But I still don't believe in forcing somebody to serve into something once they're over the age of 18.
Yeah, well, I'm not a fan of forcing anyone to do anything that they don't want to do. I don't care what age they are, unless it's a parent telling a kid what to do. I think parents have a right to parent their children how they want, as long as they're not hurting anyone or imposing their will on someone other than a minor, I guess. If you ground your children, I don't have any problem with that. That's your parental responsibility. We decided as a society that you're a minor until you're 18 years old, and after that point, I think you can do pretty much whatever you want to do. So as long as you're not hurting others or depriving others of their rights. But anyway, we got to cut to a commercial break. When we come back, we're going to move into the next topic of the show and read some of the comments here we've gotten from people on Facebook. So anyway, you guys don't want to go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Oath Keepers is a nonpartisan association of current active duty military, reserve, guard, veterans, peace officers, and firefighters who will fulfill the oath we swore, with the support of like-minded citizens who take an oath to stand with us to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So help us God. Join us at oathkeepers.org.
Support On The Move. Help us make this podcast bigger and better. You can do this by going to our store and purchasing one of our hundreds of products. All designs are original and made for patriots like you. Just go to cafepress.com/OnTheMoveShow. We appreciate your support. Hi, I'm Latasha Worley, and I work with candidates to creatively and effectively communicate their message to voters. I offer professional graphic design services from yard signs to flyers, from logos to vehicle magnets. Email me today at latashaworley@gmail.com. That's LATOSHA Worley@gmail.com for a quote on items for your campaign.
Broadcasting from deep within the heartland of free America, where liberty still shines bright. You're listening to On the Move with Mac Worley III.
All right, we're back. By the way, for those of you who listen to the commercials, if you're in the room and you're not stepping out of the room, I just want to point out the fact that my wife, her name is Latasha Worley, she does graphic design. She does have graphic design services, so she's done all the work on my show. She's created the logo and all the stuff that we have here on the show. I'm very thankful for her work and her effort here. But I just want to let you guys know that she does offer graphic design services to anybody who needs it. She's happy to cater to activists. If you have a business card you need to have, pamphlets, you want to hand out some literature about whatever specific cause you're promoting, she's happy to work with you guys on that. So just message her at latashaworley@gmail.com, and she can help you out with that stuff. So anyway, let's move on here. I want to actually, first of all, I'm going to read some of your comments here. We got Jackie again on Spreaker. He says, a minimum wage job isn't supposed to be a career decision. So I would absolutely agree with that. It's not supposed to be your career. It's a stepping stone. They talk about a living wage, but it's not meant to be able to sustain you and an entire family for a entry-level job. Entry-level jobs are just that. They're meant to be a stepping stone to get you to something else. It's to get you some work experience so you can show up to another employer and say, look, I'm able to show up on time at work, and I have a history of it, and I have a letter of recommendation from my old employer. You know, that's why we have these kind of jobs, and that's the purpose of it. You're not supposed to be able to provide and sustain an entire family on a minimum wage job, a job at McDonald's. You know, and if you want to get a better paying job, go get another job, but don't force your employer through the coercive force of government to pay you more than what you're worth. That's where I have a problem with that. But anyway, let's read some of your comments here. On Facebook, Dee says, let's see here. We're encouraged to spend above our means, encouraged to turn a blind eye as well. We are a product of our environment. I doubt we will know exactly how many emails referring to the Clinton email scandal held classified information, nor will we see any of it. Dee thinks that she's a traitor, a liar, and she's also untouchable, which honestly I believe there will be no criminal prosecution against Hillary Clinton. She will not see any jail time. I don't think that this will be anything that will lead to her spending time in jail. And the reason why is because the FBI, they answer to the Obama administration. And I think that Obama knows that he needs to have Clinton in the White House. If he wants to secure Obamacare's position, if he wants to make sure that his legislation that is essentially the biggest thing, the big thing that he got done, Obamacare, if he wants to preserve his legacy, he needs Hillary in office. Otherwise, a Republican nominee or a Republican candidate could basically go ahead and get rid of it. I mean, it's not ingrained so much in society. But imagine another 8 years of a progressive or statist president in the Democrat Party. There's no way we're going to get rid of it. It's going to be as ingrained as Social Security. We will never, ever get rid of Obamacare. But let's move on. Let's talk about something different. I guess this is controversial as well. This is a show of controversy. Let's talk about the Pope. Hey, Mark, were you paying attention to the Pope when he came into town?
I was. I thought it was a little interesting. I mean, to see how many Republicans are Catholic, and then are in opposition to what it is that he's saying. So I think it's a bit of contradiction when it comes to what was going on, because like isn't his word supposed to be the ultimate, but then he is just blasting all over capitalism, which philosophically I'm very much a capitalist. So it was an interesting trip, I think, to say the least, because I mean it's a weird day when more liberals are agreeing with the Pope than conservatives. You know what I mean? It's how the times have changed in this world, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I would like to comment on is Pope was the Pope was talking about how capitalism is essentially evil, and it's not it's an evil force, and for me I would disagree. I argue that capitalism is a force for good, and it can just like any other tool. Capitalism is a tool. It can be used for good or evil, but I think overall it is done far more good than evil. And one of those things I would like to point out, the Pope specifically talked about how air conditioning is evil, and let's point out the hypocrisy. The Vatican is air conditioned. Obviously, I'm sure his little car that he's driving around has air conditioning in it. Although his windows were down, so maybe he wasn't using it. But the point is that air conditioning actually saves lives. Every year, air conditioning saves lives. It's one of the biggest lifesavers, I would argue, in the world. According to, let's see, this is usatoday.com, there was a heat wave in France. I think this was in 2003, if I'm remembering correctly. Trying to find the date on this. I don't... 2003. Okay, there's a heat wave in France, and it resulted in 14,802 people dying from the blistering heat. And I think this is important to note. This is one clear representation of how air conditioning saves lives, because if they had AC, these people wouldn't die. But in Europe, a lot of these people don't have air conditioning. So when they hit a huge heat wave, it resulted in thousands of people dying. If they would have just had air conditioning, people would have been alive. And this happens all the time in major cities. If New York has a blackout in the middle of summer, you hear all the time about elderly people dying of heat stroke. I think that one thing that's important to note is that when the Pope starts attacking capitalism, he claims that he's against communism and socialism. By the way, that's what he claims. I would argue that he's not against it based off of his assumptions that the government should be redistributing wealth. I mean, this is his own words talking about redistribution of wealth. I have an issue with this, and again, I'm not a religious person, so I just want to point that out. I am not at all religious. I'm not casting judgment on religious people at all. But one question I would have is as far as my understanding and my history, my background of religion, especially Christianity, I come from a Christian household, and I've chosen not really to participate in religion, although I know a lot about it. I grew up in Sunday school, and I've read the Bible, and I know all this. One thing I do know about Christianity is that it's about personal responsibility and individual salvation and charity and goodwill and all of that. But it's about not forcing others to believe your beliefs, but believing your beliefs and practicing your religion on your own, and maybe trying to spread the message of your religion, but not through force. And my question to you guys out there, Christians out there, or Catholics, I guess it's probably better for Catholics, being that the Pope is the leader of the Catholic Church. Do you agree with your Pope, your guy in charge? How do you feel about this man representing your religion, and how do you feel about him talking about things that I believe are alongside with Christian values? I think capitalism and Christian values go hand in hand. I think capitalism is promoted within Christianity, and for somebody to say that it's evil and to talk about it, who's in charge of these religions, they're the head of the religion. Supposedly, they speak the word of God. Basically, from what I understand, I'm not a Catholic, by the way. So, if you're a Catholic, call in 360-450-5625. 360-450-5625. If you are a Catholic, I want to know. I just want to have a general conversation here with you about what do you think about the Pope? How do you feel about this one man representing you and your religion? Do you think that he's representing your religion properly? Do you think that his values, his life experience, and what he believes accurately depicts on what your religion believes? And the way I look at it, growing up in the church, I know that the Bible is very important. The words of God are important in the religion. You don't necessarily need to go to church to be a good Christian. This is the way I've always known it, is that if you can have a relationship with God, you can. I'm kind of turning this into a religion show. I apologize, but you can have a relationship with your God and not go to church at all. I don't know. I kind of have an issue with giving one man authority or a position of prominence inside a religion. I think men and women equally are fallible creatures. We're all capable of the same corruption. We all have the same human frailties, and I'm not Catholic, so I don't really understand the whole idea of a pope. Why somebody wants to look to what one man is saying, or even to your pastor, your preacher, put so much of an emphasis, especially if it's the antithesis of what you've read in your scripture. Again, you can have a relationship with God without being, without entering in a church or having some hierarchy above you. So I don't know. What do you think about, just in general, the Pope coming out against capitalism and standing in front of symbols like Che Guevara in Cuba and all the stuff that he's doing, his attack against air conditioning? What do you think, Mark?
God, you touched on a lot here, and you did say it's going to be controversial, so here we go.
Yeah, I gave you a warning.
First off, I think I think most religions in general have a certain sense of ridiculousness to them. I mean, to put your faith and trust into a church or an institution versus your relationship with your creator, God, the universe, whatever you believe in. I'm a very spiritual person. I would consider myself to be Christian, but not, I'm not a churchgoer. I'm not somebody that believes that the Bible is the infallible Word of God. I think it was written by fallible men, and it was a very politically transcribed book that has really shown to cause a lot of problems, damage, wars, not just the Bible, the Christian Bible, but the Quran, and when you're dealing with Catholicism, that whole pedophilia scandal just put such a horrible taste in so many people's mouths about Catholicism in general. But the thing is that if you were really a Catholic, if you were a true practicing Catholic, you are to believe that the Pope's word is the almighty word of Catholicism. And so people who are contradicting that point are really opening their eyes, I think, a little bit. Maybe they're contradicting themselves out of politics, but I really think that this opens up the idea that, yeah, it's a bit ridiculous to put all of your faith and trust into somebody that, walks around with a staff and a white coat and says, he's the almighty word of a religion. How many billions of dollars they take in money without any taxes being paid, and they always need a little bit more, and they've always got these problems when it comes to, abuses of power. The most disgusting abuses of power that we saw over the past couple of decades, when it comes to the child molestation scandals, and yet this particular pope is bashing on capitalism. Now, That being said, the concept of him bashing on capitalism, I think he's messing with semantics here. What I think he really doesn't like is fascism, which is big government being bought off by big corporations. Or maybe he's really upset about super greedy people, and greedy businesses and, screwing over the little guy. But I don't think that that's capitalism. And where I really have a big problem with and resent the quote for is that he's talking about this as if it is capitalism, and that gets people thinking, yeah, down with capitalism, and capitalism has lifted millions upon hundreds of millions, if not billions of people out of poverty. It has made our lives better, it's made our lives easier, it's made our lives more exciting and entertaining, it's made everything to a degree better. And sure, there's always going to be negative ramifications of any political system, but when you're talking about a comparison between that and, say, communism or socialism, there's no comparison to what has made people's lives better. Now, the problem that we have with this is that when people start throwing these false arguments around about what capitalism has done to something that you can't prove, which is the environment. We can measure the level of pollution, yes, but we can't say for certain the sky is falling and it's all because of capitalism, which is what I think the Pope is trying to say, which is what I think the majority of socialist leftists are trying to say, because they realize that their arguments are tired and that they're failed, and that, especially on economic issues, and when it comes to it, you can't have an almighty government, and the only way that they can get it, because that's their philosophy, is by showing, or, throwing out some false, fear that the sky is falling, says Chicken Little, and so we got to deal with the environmental, climate change, global warming, whatever they want to call it. And so him tacking that onto capitalism is where I had the biggest argument and the biggest beef with the Pope. Frankly, I think the guy's kind of cool. He's actually a lot more in touch with the world than the last two popes, and I think those are the only two popes I've been alive for, Benedict and John Paul. This guy's actually fun to watch, but I cringed when he was talking about it in the guise of capitalism, because I think the man is mistaken on that end.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I think he's talking about capitalism that he's seen, which is in fact crony corporatism. I don't think that he's
right.
I don't think that there's actually a free market country out there, except maybe Liberland, which is the new country that was created by a bunch of libertarians. So that's a real country, by the way. It's brand new. I think it's the newest country in the world. But I think this is one issue: is that capitalism is corrupted all around. The slippery slope of socialism and trying to control markets and things along those lines, and trying to do good things for the people on the government dime, which is essentially the people's dime. Again, redistribution of wealth is theft. You're taking money from one group of people and you're giving it to another. It's not Robin Hood, it's theft. You are still stealing. So by the way, you mentioned, the Pope being, the ultimate word of God. He's considered, he's called the Vicar of Christ, which, basically means that he's the word of God. What he says is basically what God says. So, I think it's dangerous when we give somebody this kind of a position to where within a religion. Again, I think that if you're a Christian, the Word of God, the Bible, is there for you to read. I personally, I'm not judging people. I think you are entitled to believe whatever you want to believe, as long as you're not hurting others or imposing your will on others. Again, I'm against coercion. I'm a volunteerist, so I respect people who are very religious. But one thing I want to point out, he talks about how capitalism is evil. But as we mentioned, our current life expectancy, women live to about 79 years old, men 72 years old. I want to go back here to colonial days. In 1776, the average life expectancy in the United States was 35 years old. By 1900, it increased to 47 years old. And now, again, we're living into the 70s. So capitalism has caused people to live longer. It is a direct result of capitalism that has resulted in advances of medicine, technology, air conditioning to keep people alive longer. It is not an evil force. It is a force of good. It has saved more lives than any other economic system in the world. It has brought more people out of poverty than any other economic system in the world. This is just a fact. And You know, I don't like the idea that the Pope has become politicized. You know, I'm not Catholic, but I want to know what you Catholics out there think. I mean, if you support this guy, I'd love to hear from you. If you don't, I'd love to hear what you think about it. I mean, I know this might be controversial, but I'm not trying to step on anybody's toes here. I adamantly think that you have a right to believe whatever you want. But for me, I have an issue with giving, individuals authority and basically saying that, what they say is the word of God, and again, I think, everybody is susceptible to corruption, and maybe this Pope isn't corrupt. I don't know anything about him. He seems to be a man of the people as far as wanting to do good things for the people, as far as trying to help the poor, help the sick. He wants to go visit people and spend time actually, in the streets talking to people. I think he's trying to do good things, and I'm not saying that he's corrupt. But what I am saying is that his political viewpoints, I think, are skewed based on his life experience, because he's only ever experienced corrupt corporatism and not true capitalism. I think that's why he's probably against it. But he claims that he's not for socialism or communism, but he stands in front of Che Guevara, a big poster of Che Guevara behind him while he's giving speeches in Cuba. He's shaking hands with the Castro regime, and he's talking about climate change, which is the new red movement. It's people call it a watermelon. It's green on the outside and it's red on the inside. It's the communist movement where they want to give control to the government on every aspect of your life. And this is where I have a problem. And I think this goes against the teachings of Christ as I know them. Again, I'm not religious, but I remember Sunday school. I remember as a kid, them preaching personal responsibility. And yes, charity is important, but charity is one thing. Forced charity, coercion, that's theft. That's not charity. And I don't think that there's... Right. One of the big things that people in the religious community, you're supposed to do good for others. You're supposed to be charitable. You're supposed to help others. But I don't think that you get any credit or a tally in your margin when it's being done through the coercive force of government. I don't think that you've been charitable because your government stole it from you and gave it to somebody else. I don't think that you get any brownie points for that in the eyes of God. What do you think, Mark?
No, I definitely agree. I think it's a tool of the left that's being used right now by saying they're basically trying to pit their, a leader of what is normally considered a conservative viewpoint to, to really divide. And I think the idea of it is that this man is very Christ-like in a number of different ways. I mean, he very much is really reinvigorating people's faith in Catholicism when it took a major beating over the past couple of decades, like I said, with the whole child molestation scandal. But that being said, they're using this as the tool to really say, well, see what he's doing about capitalism is, he's being, very Christ-like. And it's like, no, forcing the hand of government to get involved so that they coerce people, force people to take money out of the hands of some. That's not the goodness that Christ was speaking of. It's your volunteering. It's the belief that you as an individual want to do this. Now, this is where I was talking about before. Spending is caring. And so what they're saying is if we force the spending up and if we force the money out of people's hands so that some corrupt bureaucracy and a group of politicians can determine where that money is being spent, somehow their cognitive dissonance is up there going, yeah, that's the good thing to do. When government shouldn't be in the business of charity. Charity is really about volunteering out of the kindness of your own heart, not about voting for people to take money from rich people and giving it to programs that make them feel better about themselves. So, again, I'm interested in see, one, how very conservative Catholics view this man, because if you really are a true Catholic, you do look at the Pope as the almighty word. So how can you disagree with him if you're a true Catholic? That to me makes, that's a real challenge for me to wrap my mind around. And then for a lot of, say, very atheist or very, very leftist people who aren't Catholics, who are then trying to go ahead and say, yeah, see, the Pope is saying it. I mean, it's almost more of a political statement on their end. Well, it is a political statement. It's, you know, it's a manipulative tactic, not something that really is, say, following the word of Christ. You know what I mean?
Well, you know, one thing I want to point out is that, you know, he spent so much time focusing on climate change and his talking about how evil capitalism is, and air conditioning. And one thing I just kind of have to mention here, I don't really understand the thought process behind it. He didn't talk about abortion at all. I mean, I think he very briefly mentioned something about protecting the life at every stage of development, but you know, this is on the heels of the Planned Parenthood scandal, where they're selling body parts of fetuses for profit. And you know, there's been, I think, 10 videos that have been released by the Center for Medical Progress that show these images graphically, and people are upset about this. And now it's created a lot of this momentum to defund Planned Parenthood. And I think the Pope could have had something to say about that. I mean, from what I understand, abortion is against the tenets of Catholicism, and I happen to know that Mother Teresa was very active talking about that. But why didn't the Pope talk about abortion?
Well, you know, I think he said that he did, and I didn't actually listen to the entire speech. I saw a lot of the highlights of it. It was something where I don't think a lot of the media did want to address, because they do want to use this as a political statement. They believe that he's much more of a leftist, and so this is, you know, just feeding their fire because he's an ally to their cause. You know, it's interesting to me because of the fact that, you know, when you're dealing with Catholicism, I mean, this is a man that doesn't believe women belong in higher up positions. He believes, you know, marriage is between a man and a woman. He doesn't believe homosexuality. He believes homosexuality is a sin. He is somebody that, is very much against abortion. I mean, a lot of the things that very much leftist liberals are not in favor of, as a matter of fact, they're absolutely opposed to, are the things that this man is believing. But it's okay to pick and choose when you're not a Catholic, because you can go ahead and say, yeah, I agree with this, and I'm going to talk about that. I just think it's kind of thing where, you know, him being political by nature is almost more sexy fodder for the public, as opposed to him really going out and being, you know, the Pope, which is being, you know, I mean, an almighty deity. And again, I happen to like the guy personally. I think, you know, what I've seen of him, I think he's been a real breath of fresh air. But I do also believe that, you know, really talking about things like climate change, when it's just like you can't really know what's going on with that, but yet, you know, people are not really addressing a lot of the conservative issues that he has constantly been in favor of. I mean, it's a political argument, don't you think? I mean, it's a political move by the left.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I would like to think that the Pope is above that. So, you know, he's the one saying it. He's supposedly the vicar of Christ. You know, I would think that the vicar of Christ would have something to say about abortion, being that now that it has been flung into the mainstream media by the Center for Medical Progress. So, you know, I would think that if he actually stood diametrically opposed to abortion, and he thought that abortion was murder, then why isn't he talking about it now? I would, you know, that's where I stand on it. But I want to pivot here. I want to talk a little bit about just religion in general here, and looking for natural allies. One of the things, you know, we were talking about how, you know, the ramifications of a lobbying and allowing a corrupt capitalist system. And again, we're not talking about capitalism, a corrupt capitalism, which is corporatism. It's crony corporatism, where you can buy your own politician. You know, all of these things, they kind of lead towards resentment, where we're all trying to get, you know, handouts from the state. You know, we're all divided into these little groups, our subcategories. We've broken ourselves down into let's see, transvestites who are wanting something specifically here, or you know, females who are amputees wanting something specific, or just little people asking for special favors. Every class of people. We're breaking ourselves down into so specific of a class. Like I think there's now a Black Lives or a Black Transgender Lives Matter movement. It's so divided. Even within the Black Lives Matter movement, it got broken down again to Black Transgenders Lives Matter. I think that all lives matter. I don't think that's a controversial thing to say, but I guess now it is in this political environment. It's because we've divided ourselves so much. We rely on this division that the state has perpetuated by handing out special favors. They want us into these little subgroups and categories, at each other's throats, attacking each other, and that's not what I'm about. I'm about finding my allies on issues, and I think there's certain aspects of religion and libertarianism where we should be natural allies. I think we are natural allies. So in terms of religion that believes in individual responsibility, personal salvation, not collective salvation, by the way. That's a big difference, where you believe that in order for you to go to heaven, you have to force others to go, to conform to your way of life, your morality. And I disagree with that. I have a major problem with collective salvation. I don't subscribe to that. I mean, I'm not religious at all, but if I was, I grew up with a Judeo-Christian values of basically I'm working on my own salvation here. I'm trying to do what's right for my soul, and just if you don't follow my philosophy of life, or you have a different religious background or view, whatever, we can still be friends. I'm not going to go to hell because of something you've done. Now. The religion believes in perpetuating itself as far as trying to convert people or to get people to go to your church and things like that. And, I think that's all self-preservation inside the religion, and that's fine. But as far as natural allies are concerned, okay, I think that as a libertarian, I just want to be left alone. I don't want somebody telling me how to live my life. I don't want somebody, trying to reach down into my pockets and, take all of my hard-earned money. I don't want, the government shaking me upside down and seeing what falls out of my pockets. Those are the things that I don't want to be forced to do things, and I don't want others to be forced to do things against their will either. So I think that, in terms of Christianity, that's a natural ally of me. Buddhism, that's a natural ally. There's a lot of religions that believe in basically your own salvation, and they don't believe in forcing others in coercing others to do things against their will or hurting other people. So obviously, those are people that I want to align myself with. I don't want to divide into these little groups. I want to say, hey, this is what we're working towards: freedom. We actually want freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, freedom to do whatever we want to do as long as we're not hurting others. Very simple concept. But there are religions that I think are, in one in particular, that is in need of a reformation. And there's two schools of thought within this religion, and I'm talking about Islam. And again, this is apparently the most controversial show I could ever do. I've talked about everything that is divisive, and I'm talking about unity. I want to bring people together here. I don't want to divide, but one thing I just want to point out is that within Islam, there's basically two belief systems. You either believe that Sharia law must be withheld, and Sharia law basically there's no rights for women. Homosexuals are bashed, and can be killed. It's ridiculous that Sharia law is oppressive. It is extremely oppressive. So for women, homosexuals, anybody in it, the state is the ultimate authority, and even Islam itself, it means submit to the will of God. So it's oppressive, in my opinion. The idea of Sharia law, that it's the supreme law and it doesn't matter what the law of the land is, i.e. the Constitution, by the way. Those who believe in Sharia law believe it supersedes the Constitution. So that's why I have a fundamental issue with it. But within Islam, there is also the belief that Sharia law is not the way to go. And I believe that Islam is it's in the process of a reformation. I don't know what side is going to win, but there is definitely a division within this religion. And one side believes that you have to force other people to live by Sharia law, and another one doesn't. And I believe that I can coexist with the people that don't believe that you have to enforce Sharia law. But again, I'm talking about looking for natural allies, and I think that I think that libertarians and people who practice religions, I think we have a lot to that we can find middle ground on, and I think we have a lot in common. I think we should be coming together and not dividing ourselves, and I think it's time that we've had this frank conversation about it. What do you think about all this, Mark?
Well, I mean, if we can hold hands and sing Kumbaya, that would be great. But the problem with it is that it's not very fun to agree all of the time. And I say this almost in jest because it's dividing our country and it's destroying it. The division really is the fact that people want to identify as groups and not as an individual or as first Americans. I mean, I identify as an individual. I look at people as individuals, and I truly do this. I mean, this isn't one of those where I'm a hypocrite and I say, oh, those people over there or these people over here. I mean, you can categorize, you can see how the entity that benefits the most from divide and conquer is the government itself. It's the biggest tool and the biggest instrument for it. I look at it and say, people who are being divided are the ones that are dividing themselves. I mean, I was having this conversation last night at a party. I mean, it was, it was a birthday party, just a bunch of guys, just a bunch of gay men. We were talking about politics, and the guys were and I was talking about how the most homophobic group of people that I've encountered are black men, and the most racist group of people that I've encountered are white gay men. And so it's just the kind of thing of minorities beating up on minorities to try to be, the lower one on the totem pole or the newest kid on the block, when it's like, it's more fun to divide. It's more fun to disagree than to agree. And unfortunately, because it's sexier to do so, people are doing so, and it's destroying the fabric of a nation that was really built on individuality, individual rights, your right to be who it is that you want to be without government intrusion. And the big problem with it is that there's always been these inconsistencies. I mean, all men are created equal. This was written by slave owners. You get people who are talking about, when you were talking, and this is one of the things, about the whole, the Black Lives Matter. I mean, we shouldn't be talking about anybody, any one group in particular lives that matter, because all lives should matter. But that doesn't matter, because it's the kind of thing that, in my opinion, what has caused this or what has brought this out so much is the government's agents or the cops, which have basically been able to take the law into their own hands. They're rarely ever held accountable. They're always given a pass because they put their life on the line. And I give cops a lot of respect, but the whole Black Lives Matter was a result of something. It wasn't a pause for something. You see what I mean? And so the idea of, the fact that, in my opinion, it was government that has done this. I mean, the Civil Rights Act has really really put black people on a second-class citizenry to be basically said, look, we need to take care of you. We need to coddle you. We need to, make up for things in the past. And don't get me wrong. I mean, black people were given a raw deal in this country, just like Native Americans were. But the only way to look past this, the only way to get past this, in my opinion, is to stop identifying people as groups. It's to look at people as individuals, which is the major tenet of libertarianism. So Christianity or Muslims or homosexuals or, African Americans or Native Americans or women, the more that we talk about these kinds of things, and while it's fun and it's great and that kind of thing, the more that we're really dividing ourselves. I think, it starts with the language of how we identify. And, we wouldn't have a radio show if we were talking about this kind of stuff, right? But it is the kind of thing that I think continuously divides people when we're dealing with things like, race and religion and sexuality and gender. I mean, those are the kinds of things that are, when people identify with that, then they tend to not want to see how they're allies, which is why we need more people like yourself and hopefully me to talk about how, you are my ally. You know what I mean? Just because you have a different skin color than me, you're still my ally because we can agree on X, Y, and Z.
Exactly.
And so I don't really know where I was going with that, but I wanted to step on for a moment.
I think this harkens back to the principles of the founding. I'm often I have had this conversation several times about American exceptionalism, and people, a lot of people think, American exceptionalism means that we're just better. We're better than everyone else. We can kick anybody's butt on anything. America just rocks, and we're better. And we're better. We're just better human beings. And I think that is a dangerous concept. I think that's dangerous because it's almost like a nationalistic style, Nazi kind of approach to it, where you're thinking that you are literally a superior human being or superior race. And that is that's a scary thought for me. For me, what American exceptionalism is for me is the ideas, the principles that this country was founded on: individual liberty, personal responsibility. And again, anyone who believes in these values, I can stand by you. And even if we don't agree on everything, if we agree on one issue, I'll stand by you on that issue. If we agree on it, I have no problem standing with liberals who want to stop the war on drugs. I have no problem doing that. I'll stand by them. Even if they're liberals who want more redistribution of wealth, I'll stand with them on that one issue of stopping the drug war and oppose them on the redistribution of wealth. But if they overall, again, we're not natural allies, me and liberals, we're not natural allies when it comes to that, because we have other aspects within these American exceptionalist values. Again, the values of the founding, we have dramatic differences. And I think when looking for natural allies, I think libertarians and people who share these values, such as many Christians who just want to be left alone. They don't want the government to be the ultimate authority. They want just the freedom to do what they are going to do, to make their own mistakes. That's all I want is enough room to screw things up. That's all I want. So
I want to make a mistake, damn it.
Yeah. I don't want to be overly protected by the government and have all these fail-safes and stuff like that. It's first of all, it's a crazy tax burden to put on every citizen to make this utopian society where there's no poverty, there's no crime, everyone's living the perfect life it's. First of all, that will never happen. We're never, ever, ever going to get a society where the government is able to do that kind of stuff. The way that we do that is we empower the citizens to make those changes in their own lives, in their own communities, and take personal responsibility for themselves, and provide charity for those who are willing to work their way out of poverty, and to stop helping people, to stop being enablers of people who are just looking for a handout instead of a hand up.
Yeah, and when you sort of mention upon this, because it's always interesting, how quickly a Nazi situation can be brought up. But you really start to think about this. I really want to tell people about is that we're not that far off from what could be. And when I say this, it kind of people are like roll their eyes or freak out about it. But look at really what's going on in the Republican Party. It's very much a nationalistic kind of thing. America, America, America. We need, we're against illegal immigration, and I'm not for illegal immigration, but it's very much a nationalistic kind of feel. Nationalism. We need to be gung ho America because America is the best. And I'm not denying that this is the best country on the planet, but I'm not necessarily, a big, I'm not really just feeling like it's all about America or a global economy. The people who are so pro-America kind of scare me a little bit, because when you're dealing with the opposite side of nationalism, on the left you're dealing with socialism. And when you see how big these socialists really want to make government, they want bigger government and more free handouts, because that buys off more votes, and they can just give everybody everything, taking away from the rich. Not only are they economically unsavvy, incredibly misguided, and very historically inaccurate, but they're scary too, because when you start to realize how the left and the right, when the politicians, when you can see the Boehners golfing with the Obamas, and you can see, people on the left who are, praising people on the right when they're supposed to be diametrically opposed. I'm okay with being, nice to one another. When they start to become, the super nationalists become real buddy-buddy with the super socialists, when it almost seems as though that should be in direct opposition to one another, lest we forget what nationalist socialism was and why it's just basically a longer version of what the Nazi Party was about, which is all go for Germany and let's, basically, it was fascism, and it was nationalist socialists that really got them into such a problem, combined with a mass amount of inflation. And when we're printing money the way that we are, Mac, just quantitative easing, like trillions of dollars just being printed, eventually the piper's got to be paid, and that's going to come to a point where you could start to see some martial law coming around. You could start to see some major amounts of inflation, and then you have more and bigger government, and then they're taking away the ability to really think and be an individual, because you're being divided as groups, and so nobody bands together, and that's the best way to form a very fascist regime. And so, to bring up Nazism is it's callous in a way, and it's paranoid in another way. But really, do you see where I'm getting at? Is we're not that far off from this kind of thing when the left is just unabashedly socialist and the right is unabashedly nationalist. And to some degree, when you get those two together, it gets really scary, especially combined with the ability of, our government to just print money the way that inflation was back in Germany. This is a situation that I think we should all be a little bit more timid of and not so embracing of.
So I want to mention here, because you covered a lot of points here, and
I know I can ramble on, can't I? Sorry, Max. This is your.
I like that. I like that. You give me a lot of material here, so I want to talk about specifically as far as the nationalist side and the socialist side. So first of all, I would agree that there are some tendencies. I would disagree that overwhelmingly, maybe the establishment GOP and maybe a portion of people who would refer themselves as patriots in the community may have some nationalist tendencies, and I would agree with that. For me, not everybody, and I'm not saying that. I think that there are many of us out there who stick to these values of American exceptionalism, what I believe is American exceptionalism: independence, freedom, personal responsibility, personal liberty, and just not hurting others, and the rule of law, the Constitution, things along those lines. But when you start saying that some aspects of our society are better, or that we are just better people, and that first of all, I've mentioned this before. I think that the left, for example, they come from a position of superiority when they say that, the government could never turn tyrannical. That's ridiculous. This stuff could never happen. I think that they're coming from a position of superiority that I believe is bigoted upon everyone else in the world. That we're better than everyone else in the world who is either A, suffering through tyranny, or B, has in the past had tyrants. So we're better than our predecessors. We're better than everyone because we're America, and damn it, that we're just better. So I disagree with that. I think that we suffer from the same human frailties as everyone else. What makes us different, what makes us stand out, are these adherents to these values. These values that I believe are exceptional, and what make us exceptional are these values. So as we stray further away from them, we become less and less exceptional. Again, there are those who still adhere to these, but our government in general is not, and we have again a bunch of people who aren't really willing to fight in Congress over things that they supposedly believe in on the Republican side. And I think in large part they are nationalists, as you said. A lot of these politicians are statist as well. Let's just call it statist, because I don't think that they want to decrease the size of government. I think they just want to change who's in charge of it. They don't care about how big the government is. They don't care about how Obamacare is in my opinion, immoral. It's a big, huge redistribution of wealth ploy, which again I have a moral disagreement with. But in addition to it, you now, in order to be a legal citizen, you have to purchase a product in order to not be taxed or fined, depending on how the Supreme Court justifies it this week. So.
From an insurance company.
Yeah, exactly. So this is, and we have Republicans who are saying that, we're going to repeal and replace. How about we just get rid of it and let the free market take over? Why do we need to replace it? Let's get rid of it. The polls, when it first happened, I think 70 or 80% of Americans did not want Obamacare to begin with, and it's been thrust upon us. We don't want it, but these politicians only care about who's in charge of the Leviathan, not that the Leviathan is getting too big. And I do agree that we are at a serious crossroads here, and we have dangers of going dark. Imagine, it's easy to conflate, to the Nazi regime, or it happens all the time, and it's almost kind of ridiculous in some cases how often it's used, comparing our government to the Nazis. I think we're far from it. But one thing I'll tell you, it's extremely easy to prove that we live in a police state. And that's one of the most dangerous things about it, is that how easy it is to prove that we live in a police state. When I went out and open carried, I wasn't out there like many people think I was out there to make a point. I wasn't. I wasn't out there to get a reaction from police. It's not why I was doing that. I was there to talk to people about gun rights. And in doing that, I was aware that I could have been shot. I was aware that things could have happened, but I was also aware that these were risks that I was willing to take in order to promote a message of personal freedom, liberty, these American exceptionalism that I believe in. I was prepared to pay the consequences if necessary. But this is something that I just want to point out. You can possibly die for doing things like that. You can die for questioning a police officer. You may be completely in the right. You may be well within your rights of a citizen to not submit to an unlawful search. You may be completely and totally justified. But that doesn't change anything. You may beat the charge, but you won't beat the right. If they want to send you to jail, they'll take you to jail. It doesn't really matter about it. And you can't fight that. You shouldn't fight that, first of all. I'm not arguing for or advocating for violence against police. No. But it's important for us to point out that the police are the enforcement arm of the federal and state leviathans. And it's important that we have organizations like Oath Keepers that have these organizations essentially infiltrated. The police are infiltrated from people who are going to uphold the Constitution. We need people in these things that are going to question the authority of their leadership, who are going to say, you know what, that's not entirely constitutional, so I'm not going to do that. And we need these people on our side. So, it's very frustrating for me seeing the tendency of how we're growing the federal leviathan, how the people on both sides of the aisle calling for the expansion of the police state can't see that they're basically just calling for their chains to get heavier and heavier, and realize that we're never going to live in this perfect society, this utopia where everyone is safe, everyone is provided for, and it's completely fair. There's never going to be that situation. But what is more likely to happen is we're going to create a society where the statist authority has the ultimate authority, and those who question it are silenced. They're disappeared. There is no political opposition, and we live in a one-party state. And that happens all across the world right now. Communist regimes exist right now. It's not like I'm talking about something that is a fragment of our history, of past. It's happening now. We're not better than that. We're not better than those people. Our values are, but those people are the same people as us. They're human beings. They're the same as us. I have a problem with building this Leviathan that could ultimately be used and turned against the people. That's where I have a problem with. What do you think about all that, Mark?
I couldn't agree more. I think this is something that I want to throw out to the more conservative listeners in the audience, and that the scary part of this is that how much blind faith I hear my conservative friends put into the police force. It's like they turn the other cheek when they see just massive amounts of torture and abuse and senseless killings of people. And and again, I think that's where the Black Lives Matter came from, because you've heard the term driving while black, and a lot of white people will just kind of roll their eyes at it, but I'm like, no, this happens a lot. It's the kind of thing that, it took me moving from Portland, a very white city, to moving to Seattle, which is a lot more diversity, even though it's still a very white city, but certainly not to the degree Portland is, to, see some more diversity and to see how people are treated. Very well-mannered people of color who are just being, who are basically being disrespected, unlawfully searched, pulled over for no reason. And it's just, when you put this blind faith in the government's agents, which is the cops, just because of the fact that they put their lives on the line. And yes, I believe they deserve a lot of credit for that, and they deserve higher pay for that. But you've got to get rid of the bad ones. And that starts with the same kind of thing when it comes to teachers. People on the left put all this blind faith into our teachers, and it's like, yeah, absolutely. They deserve a lot of credit. They probably deserve a lot more money. But the problem with it is that we cannot get rid of the bad ones. And when you have cops who do not rat on other cops, when you have cops who will just blindly defend another one with the thin blue line and with with basically, they're hiding behind a badge, and the fact that you can get juries to acquit these people or not even indict them when there's so much evidence that we should at least have a trial in this instance. It irks me, because the very people who are afraid of the government or who are looking at tyranny through Obamacare, which, you can call that tyranny, but tyranny is when these cops are busting through your front door, killing your dog, all because of the fact that you have a dime bag of pot under your bed. That's tyranny.
Or they got the wrong house. That happens very often.
Essentially, yeah. And then shooting poor innocent kids in the head and then basically getting off for it because of the fact that they're just doing their job. That is the most ridiculous argument. These people should be held to a higher standard, not a lower one. Like I said, give them more money, give them better benefits, but get the other guys the hell out of there who are doing a bad job. And not just fire them. They belong in prison, for life, for doing this kind of stuff. And the problem with it is the majority of conservatives I talk to just think they should deserve a pass because, they put their lives on the line. It's like, you keep putting this blind faith into these people, we're going to have a police state just like what we have now. And that's the big problem that I have when it comes to this. I shudder to think what life would be like without police officers, but I can't stand the way life is with these corrupt police officers.
I think one of the biggest things that you can point out here is the discrepancies, and this is on both sides of the aisle, the right and the left, is that the government can do what an individual could not morally do, as long as it's your side. As long as it's something that you want them to do. Like, for example, most people would argue that if I was to kick in your door right now and to rob you blind, I take let's say 25% of the money that you have in your house, and I take that and I go give it to somebody who's poor down the street, that would be morally wrong. That's still wrong. But the people don't have a problem when the government does that because, hey, that's our team. We want redistribution of wealth. We want the underprivileged to have these subsidies from the government. And again, as I mentioned, this creates other classes of people who are asking for handouts and getting the same thing. So it creates that cycle. But it's the hypocrisy even on both sides. And again, I think that the right does this as well, where they say, it's okay for them to kick in your door and shoot your dog, the police, to kick in your door and shoot your dog and to throw you into jail just because you wanted to smoke a little pot or whatever, But if an individual was to do that, and let's say the situation was reversed, if an individual was to lock you in their basement because you decided to drink alcohol, is that okay? But no, they wouldn't. No one would say that that's okay. But it's okay when the government does it, and it's okay when it's marijuana because it fits into a nice little neat narrative that people want, And I just think the ultimate issue here is not, first of all, number one, stay consistent. Stay intellectually consistent. And number 2 is to try to prevent the government from gaining more power. They've already got enough. They've got far too much power as it is, and I think they need to be taken down a peg or two as far as their power and reined in. We need to pull back on the reins of government and get away from this idea that the government can make your life better, that the government creates jobs. I mean, that is the biggest myth in the world. The government does not create jobs. It steals money. Now, it may build roads. It may be a part of building bridges and things like that, but are you telling me that there's no way that the private sector could not build a road? You telling me that there's no way that the private sector could build a bridge? I would disagree. I think that we can figure those things out before. Roads have been built without governments before. That is a fact. So when we're talking about this utopian idea where all of our medical is provided, all of our needs and our food is provided for us, there's no weapons in our society, and the government is in charge of our protection. All of these things, what I've just described to you, is prison. That is a prison system. Only the government has the guns. They take care of all of your medical and food needs, and weapons are prohibited. But let me ask you, Mark, are prisons a safe place? Are they a weapon-free area?
No. I mean, they're supposed to be, I guess, but I mean, the prisoners have been, I mean, God, didn't Charles Manson run a drug ring out of his own prison cell?
But this is the utopia that the liberals paint. You know, this is the picture that they're every time they describe this, I just imagine prison, and this is what they want. They want you to be in a prison where the federal government has the ultimate authority over every aspect of your life. Everything is taken care of, and we're supposed to be better off. When in reality, we've seen the fruit of these kind of policies with places like Chicago, where it's completely disarmed, and it's got some of the worst gun violence in the country.
Oh yeah, I mean, even just look at France. I mean, how many different massive mass shootings were there? And yet guns are banned. I mean, you have even more violence in the UK when guns are banned. So I mean, it's the kind of thing where banning guns, and I mean that's the surefire way to socialism. That's the only thing that's keeping people together. Keeping this system free. And while it's getting less and less free, it's the one thing that will assuredly make it a socialist country, is by banning guns or by taking away the rights to them. And it's also interesting, because when you really go in and you read the Second Amendment, people talk about how, they'll misunderstand the concept of it, because they're basically saying, oh, well, it needs to be a regulated militia. See, they talk about it being regulated as militia. And it's like, no, A, the Bill of Rights are for individuals, number one, and B, it's for the fact that you need to control your own government, and you have to keep them under control. And that's how you keep it under control, is by giving individuals the right to bear their own arms.
Yeah, and I'm very pro Second Amendment, as anybody who listens to this show would know. I have a major problem with giving the government control over every aspect of our life, and I think we're headed down that path. The Leviathan keeps sprouting heads, and we're all turning on each other rather than the true enemy, which is the state. That governments have killed more people than any other unnatural force in history. Just look at the Great Leap Forward in China, where millions of people were killed, and this is called the Great Leap Forward. Mm-hmm. There's so many instances of tyrannical governments killing people. We talked about the Nazis. It's happened in with Stalin, and I mean it's happened all over, and it's even happening now with ISIS. ISIS is the religious authority in Syria and the government in Syria now, and what they say goes. I mean, people are dying from the coercive force of government today. It's not a figment of the past. One thing I want to talk about here, I want to actually pivot here. you may be familiar with this individual. However, I was actually not. Stephen Colbert, he's apparently a comedian, but he's also a pundit. They get away with these loophole kind of situations where they can make political commentary, but they also are not held responsible for the things that they say because, I'm just a comedian. I can be a wise guy, whatever. But anyway, Ted Cruz and Donald Trump, they've both been on Stephen Colbert's show, The Late Show. Apparently, he replaced somebody. I don't know who he replaced. I think it was
Stephen Colbert.
What was that?
Yeah, you don't know Stephen Colbert? He's a pretty funny guy.
Yeah, I don't have cable, so I don't know who this guy was.
He followed Jon Stewart on The Daily Show, and then he took over David Letterman.
Jon Stewart. No, I've never heard of her either. So, actually, I'm just kidding. I know who Jon Stewart is. But okay, so I got a clip here from Ted Cruz being on there, and they're talking about Reagan, and they're talking about gay marriage. So I want to play it. I want to get your response. We'll be right back after this clip here.
It's about Reagan for a second.
Yes.
Is that Democrats, and Republicans have had reasons why they liked Ronald Reagan. But does today's modern Republican Party reflect some of the things that Reagan did? Reagan raised taxes. Okay, Reagan actually had a amnesty program for illegal immigrants. Neither of those things would allow Reagan to be nominated today. So, to what level can you truly emulate Ronald Reagan? Isn't that from a period of time when he was willing to work with Tip O'Neill across the aisle to get stuff done? Isn't that what people want more than anything else? Is not just principles, but action.
Well, I'll tell you, number one, as I travel the country, I haven't seen anyone saying the thing we want of Republicans is to give in more to Barack Obama in the direction we're going. I don't hear that across the country.
But are those aspects of Reagan something you could agree with? Raising taxes and amnesty for illegal immigrants. Could you agree with Reagan? Could you agree with Reagan on those two things?
No, of course not.
All right.
But Ronald Reagan also signed the largest tax cut in history. Mm-hmm. He reduced government regulations from Washington.
Mm-hmm. He did.
And economic growth exploded. You know, when Reagan came in from 1978 to 1982, economic growth averaged less than 1% a year. There's only one other 4-year period where that's true. That's true from 2008 to 2012. And what Reagan did, he cut taxes, he cut regulations, he unchained small businesses, and economic growth boomed. Millions of people were lifted out of poverty into prosperity in the middle class.
But when conditions changed in the country, he reversed his world's largest tax cut and raised taxes when revenues did not match the expectations. So it's a matter of compromising. Will you be willing to compromise with the other side? Because I would say that it is possible, it's entirely possible that your plan might be the right one. If it turns out not to be the right one, would you be willing to compromise with the other side, change your mind, and do something that the other side wants and not feel like you've capitulated with the devil?
So my attitude...
Is it possible? Because you're a religious man, right? You're a religious man. And I dabble. But would you believe that it's important not to call the other side the devil?
Absolutely. There's nothing diabolical about you.
What about your opponents politically? Are they diabolical?
Of course not. And in fact, my response in politics is when others throw rocks and insult, I don't respond in kind. And in fact...
That's true, you haven't.
And that's true of both Republicans or Democrats. When others attack me, I make a point of keeping the focus on substance, keeping the focus on how do we turn this country around. Mm-hmm. People are fed up. What they want is jobs and economic growth. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you mentioned before, you said, Cruz, you're a very conservative guy. Listen, what I'm fighting for are simple principles. Live within our means. Mm-hmm. Stop bankrupting our kids and grandkids. Follow the Constitution.
And no gay marriage. And no gay marriage.
Well, no, actually, let's be precise. Under the Constitution,
yes,
marriage is a question for the states. If you want to change the marriage laws...
It doesn't mention marriage in the Constitution.
We have had a country for over 200 years.
Yeah. So you may be right, but it doesn't mention marriage in the Constitution. You believe that
marriage... And
that's
exactly why it's a question for the states, because the 10th Amendment says if it doesn't mention it, it's a question for the states. That's in the Bill of Rights. Everything that is not mentioned is left to the state. So if you want to change the marriage laws...
I'm asking what you want.
I believe in democracy. I believe in democracy, and I don't think we should trust...
Guys, however you...
Okay, so they were starting to boo him in the audience, and Colbert says, "Hey, guys, this is my guest. Don't boo him." And, first of all, I got to give him credit for that. So, Mark, I have a question for you. Being that you are a gay man yourself, how do you feel about gay marriage? Is this a state's issue?
I think it should be out of government's hands to begin with. It's the most ridiculous thing to say that the government should be involved in determining who enters into a contract, if it's a consenting adult. And that's the big thing here. A consenting adult, where my Republican friends have really gone awry, or I guess more conservatives have gone awry on this, is saying, well, what's next? Marrying your dog? No, silly. Your dog is not a consenting adult. And I'm sorry that, people want to throw the religion into this aspect, because really what they're saying is we want government regulating the church, what the church can or cannot do. If a church wants to marry two men, then the church should be able to. So basically what they're saying is they want the overarching powers of the government to come and say no. But I don't think the government has anything to do with marriage to begin with. I think it's ridiculous to say that the government should be able to determine who gets to enter into a contract and who does not. And really, the main point of marriage licenses to begin with was to stop black men from marrying white women. And it was really just the whole issue of it is to really suppress one minority, and now they're using it to suppress another. And it shouldn't be state's issue. It shouldn't be anybody's issue. It's a religious issue, and it's a contractual issue. And government shouldn't have any right to determine who gets to enter into a contract and who does not, if they allow other consenting adults to do the same. So my argument with this was not about loving couples and families and all this. Great, that's fine, and I think that that's great and all that. And again, I'm all for anybody entering into the contract. The point is that what the government was saying before is that if you were a woman, you could not marry a woman only because of the fact that you were a woman. That's sexual discrimination that's outlawed in the Constitution under Title IX, I believe, or Title VII. The point of this is that this stuff was never brought up. It was basically saying that, everybody's argument was about loving families and, gays deserve the same rights as straight people. No. You're basically telling, A, a church that it can't do what it wants to do, and B, you're saying that somebody of one sex cannot do something that somebody of the other sex could. Whether or not, as a heterosexual male, whether or not you want to marry a man is irrelevant. The government says that you cannot simply because you're a man, and that's wrong.
So here's where I have an issue with this, because I obviously, by the way, we only got 1 minute left in the show here, so I'm going to have to make this quick. I don't think that the government has any business being involved in the institution of marriage. It's a religious ceremony, in my opinion, and the government has no business being in there. I agree it started from an oppression side of it, basically, to prevent African-American males from marrying white women, so I disagree with that. However, I also disagree with the fact that the federal government is getting involved in this process, because it is not a power that was granted to them in the Constitution. Therefore, they're exceeding their power by stepping in and getting involved in the state's issue. But I do think that overall we need to get them out of government or out of the institution of marriage in general. But anyway, at this time, guys, we're wrapping up the show. I really do appreciate you guys for tuning in. Thank you so much, MacPack, for your continued support. Check us out on our website, OnTheMoveShow.com, here at Spreaker.com/OnTheMoveShow. Check us out on Twitter, Twitter.com/OnTheMoveShow, and Facebook.com/OnTheMoveShow. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube.com/OnTheMoveShow. And thanks so much, Mark, for joining us today. I really appreciate it. You guys have a wonderful night. Take care.